Well, I mean, I hope that we're building more responsible, more thoughtful people, and I hope that we're. I think that the labor force, it's tough because the labor force is doing two things at the same time. It's getting more skilled, and it's there's more people who are getting more skilled and better at their jobs with way more knowledge than we ever had. But at the same time, based on the pace of restaurants opening up, it's unsustainable. I mean, we always talk about like how hard it is to find good help in the restaurant industry, and I mean, we have no one to blame but ourselves. Like, I look around, we are building so many new restaurants in Phoenix. Every week, there's 5 new restaurants opening up. The end of the year, I mean, just in the downtown area alone, we had a news article like last year or the year before. It was like, 34 new restaurants and bars opened up down here. 34. So you figure an average of like 25 people working at each of those places. How many people is that? Like, you know, you're talking about like 600 some people like working in these restaurants. Where'd they come from? How did you train all 600 of those people to man all of these incredibly ornate, detailed cocktail bar and restaurant concepts that are serving very high concept food? Like, how do you do that?
This episode made possible by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, owner and operator at Little Rituals and partner at Arizona Cocktail Weekend, Aaron DeFeo. My man, Aaron, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I am a juggernaut.
Dude, I'm
a juggernaut of success.
Psyched to have you here. Your partner, Ross Simon, called you out to be a guest on the show, and I love it because, I mean, who knows you better than your partner? Right. And honestly, I'm also psyched because after just a little bit of time with you, I found out you listen to the show.
I do, actually. You know, I'm a podcast junkie, and as a podcast junkie and somebody who also works in the restaurant and bar world, you know, you've got to be looking for new content. And there's a few ones that I listen to religiously that are very focused, and they're smaller episodes. They're probably like 20 to 30 minutes about, you know, great techniques to increase, productivity, lower food costs, et cetera, et cetera. Those are very specific, but you know, I like the long form of this podcast specifically because
that's music to my ears, man.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, I'm sitting there, I'm entering invoices, I'm doing some sort of administrative work, and this is on in the background all the time.
I gotta be honest. I get worried about that a lot because, I mean, people are so busy in the restaurant industry, and also the common narrative in the world of marketing is that short form content is where it's at right now. But I, honestly speaking, for my own sanity, I love having meaningful, long format, deep conversations with people. I don't think I could do this if I was in and out, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, driving all over the country. It takes me longer to set up and break down than to actually have the conversation. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about it this way. I mean, aren't audiobooks popular?
Yeah.
Okay, so those are extremely long, right? So those are not short form in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And I find myself consuming, especially now that, you know, we have such like an audio medium is so accessible anywhere you go. I find myself burning through content so quickly that I literally can't possibly, you know, have enough, right?
Yeah. I mean, I really do believe this. I think marketing is the bane of human existence. With that said, that's in one cheek, and the other cheek, I see its value. I'm not saying that marketing doesn't hold value, but at the same time, I think it's really important that we're conscious of what marketing is doing. And I think the reason why short form content is the way to go and all these algorithms are geared to it is because it's about trying to fit as many impressions into a period of time as possible. Right. And that's what serves the companies that host this media. They make more money where they can get as much impressions as possible. So is that really what humans want? Do humans want short-term content, or are we just addicted to it? And is that what's best for the marketing company so they can get as much ad and media space sewed into a period of time as possible? Right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, what are we doing, people? Like, I don't know.
I mean, we could probably spend about 4 or 5 hours talking about, what some of these marketing and influencing platforms have done to our brains and our minds, and how they're inadvertently shaping our lives in our industry. But, you know, we could probably talk about that a little bit, but I don't want to get too deep into it because I'm sure
Speaking of which, we had 2 conversations, and I told you, I said, I'm like, let's bookmark these. So off air, we're talking. The podcast started before we hit record, and I was like, Aaron, this is good stuff. We got to stop talking. We got to save it for the podcast. We're talking about tipping. What was the other thing? I just want to make
tech stack.
Tech stack. Okay. So let's just bookmark that so I don't forget. But before we dive into who you are, Aaron, and how you got to where you are today, let's get that motivational, inspirational, and ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
Well, I'm gonna say kind of my mantra is act with purpose, and if you're gonna do it, do it. I like to be firmly in the camp of I don't try a bunch of stuff and kind of let them go by the wayside. If I'm going to do something, I do something. I act very purposefully.
Yeah, I love that. And I just literally edited the interview that I recorded with Alex McIntyre this morning. So Alex is behind Chin Up Donuts. Have you tried them out yet? They're an emerging brand here in Phoenix.
There's a lot of donut places. I'm excited to try it. I mean, I try not to try too many donuts, but
do you like everything bagels?
Oh yeah,
they have an everything bagel donut. So they're tying savory with like the world of donuts, which is right up my alley. But anyway, I was talking to Alex, and she said she came from the world of Amazon, and why this resonates with me is even when you're a giant organization like Amazon, that's exactly their approach. Just do it and start something and try and start small. So Amazon is made up of all these different divisions, but all those different divisions act like startups. They're little companies that just do things and like ready, fire, aim constantly, but just start and you'll learn. You only learn through doing. So
yeah, I mean, I should clarify and say, like, you know, obviously you can try lots of different things, but if you're going to do something, you need to actually put the effort and the full force of your attention into it. Otherwise, you really will never know if it's going to be successful.
Exactly. But I think some people are paralysis by analysis. They're afraid to start because they want it to be just right. It's never going to be just right.
And I'm sure I suffered from that too. I mean,
me too.
I'm a person who worked many, many years before I ever opened a bar, but all I could talk about for the 10 years or 15 years leading up to when I opened a bar was opening a bar. Right. Every day it was like, gonna open that bar soon. And yeah, 15 years later, then I finally did it.
That's a great segue. Before we kind of dive into the journey of how you got to where you are today, and it looks like you started right out of college. Like this is something that you knew you were passionate about early. Paint the big picture. So you have rituals.
Yeah.
You have the Arizona cocktail weekend. Anything else we should know about you as far as where you are today? And we'll start with the end in mind.
So I own a little company called Solid Sipping, and Solid Sipping is kind of the umbrella company for everything that I do.
Okay.
And it's technically a consulting company, though I do very infrequent consulting. Mostly my efforts are divided between my three main businesses, which are Little Rituals, Arizona Cocktail Weekend, and Stable, which is a really fantastic new sort of juice alternative that we've developed. It's a facsimile of citrus juice, essentially, that we created to be super sustainable, affordable, used just like lemon and lime juice, with a much longer refrigerated shelf life and no consistency issues.
Cool. I just want to make sure there wasn't anything I'm missing. So go back to the beginning now. Where does it make sense to start sharing your story?
Well, I think the thing that's important is that, the industry is usually made up of a lot of colorful characters and a lot of people who never thought they were going to be in the industry, especially not for the long term. I think a majority of people get into serving or bartending or hosting or doing any of these kind of jobs as a stopgap, as something to make supplemental money, or, hey, I'm going to college and I'm going to become a server. I don't think there's that many people who graduate high school or in high school and are like, I'm going to be a career server, a career bartender. I think people kind of fall into it and then they discover the passion for it, or they don't, or they get out, Yeah.
I always make it a point whenever I'm talking to somebody, because I spend a lot of time in restaurants. So in between the interviews, when I'm talking to the staff, I never ask, what do you do full time? Like, what's your real job? I'm always, my question is, are you a lifer?
Right. Absolutely.
Like, are you a lifer? Like, is this what is it? Are you doing it? Like, is this it? And they're like, and I love it when they say, yeah, because then we have the best conversations. I have great conversations with everyone, but I think it's important to not just think that this is just for now, because it's such a great career.
Yeah. And you don't necessarily know that until you find that passion for it. And you know what? This could be a career for somebody, and then they can have an entirely separate career down the road, or they could have had an entirely separate career before and then found this. For me, I started off doing journalism, creative writing. I was actually a journalist. I was doing sports reporting. I started to do a little bit of nonfiction stuff. And at the time, I mean, it's probably no secret to anybody that journalism is a dying and or like very difficult field to make money in.
Is it though?
Well, yeah, I mean, for a vast majority of people.
Right.
And this, of course, we are going to have to rewind the clock a little bit here. Let's talk 25 years ago, because 25 years ago, there was not a burgeon. I mean, there was still a lot of print journalism out there, but like the pay was exorbitantly bad. It's just like, you know, I got passed over for a full-time staff position, which was paying $8.50 at the time, and it made me quit the field because I was like, this is a terrible wage.
How old were you?
I was 18. I've been doing it for like 2 or 3 years, but
you started young.
Yeah.
So you quit.
Yeah. Well, I was about to finish up. I was in college, and I was doing journalism and creative writing. I think I originally wanted to be a novelist, and that was kind of my goal. And I thought, the journalism would be kind of what pays the bills until I wrote a novel or a nonfiction book or something. And after losing that position and a couple other things, I said, you know what, I just need to get a job.
Yeah. Do you know Matt Snap by any chance?
I do know Matt.
I was
Yeah.
going to say, you guys must have great conversations, because he too wanted to be a novelist, and he's super passionate about the world of cocktails. So
Yeah, and I know he still does stuff. I believe he writes a lot of the text for Undertow's menus and Century Grand's
the
menus.
story behind it all,
Yeah.
which is really cool. I like how he's encompassing his, is that the right way you said that word? He's using his passion for writing in telling the story, like the narrative, it's not even a true story, but it's like combining those passions.
Right.
Anyway, we're here to talk about you.
No. Yeah, I mean, I love that. I mean, it's definitely, the creativity, I think that I have inside of me that was begging to get out when I was really concentrating on writing is something that I've been able to find a home for in making cocktails and in doing this in the industry. But at the time, I literally just got a job being a bouncer at a nightclub because it was the first thing that came along. I had a buddy, I was coaching football at the time, and one of the other coaches said, hey, go down to this nightclub and ask for Chucky. And when you go in there to see Chucky, like, he'll get you sorted out. He'll get you a job. And I did go down there, and I did ask for Chucky. And I said, hey, Chucky, Tex sent me down here for a job. And he said, who the hell's Tex? Actually, I'm sure he said something else that was probably a little more offensive than that. But I ended up getting a job. I was 18. Probably shouldn't have been working there, but they didn't really ask. And actually, everyone assumed I was a lot older when I started. So I think for the first year I worked there, everyone thought I was in my mid-20s. And then finally they were like, how come you never come out drinking with us? And I was like, well,
challenging.
Yeah, it might be a little, I don't have a fake ID. So I got into being a nightclub security guy, and I thought, this is what I want to do. I was like, I'm going to just be the best. I'm going to become head security. That's what I want to do. So I did become head security, and then I got offered a barback position, and I kind of balked at that, and I said, I don't know if I want to do that. I kind of like being head security, and they kind of forced me into it, and then I became head barback, and then they were like, hey, do you want to be a bartender? And I was like, I don't know about that. I became head bartender, and I kind of worked my way up that way, and then I got into the management game pretty early on, probably within the first 4 years. So I was about 22 or 23 when I first started managing.
Okay. Well, what point along this journey because it doesn't seem like you were like intentional about going out to become a barman, right? So when did this passion, this desire to really be the best version but I do think what's cool is that no matter what you were doing, you wanted to be the best version of it.
Right, and I think that's part of it. Is I tend to be a person that sticks around and sticks through something. I tend to be at last. I've said this before to people. I don't think everyone should follow my example. I tend to stick around longer than I should in certain projects or certain situations. I usually would be at jobs for like 5 years, which, maybe the conventional wisdom is maybe a little less than that if you're trying to gain a lot of experience. I think early on it hurt me because I didn't get as much varied experience as I could have had I, tried to do other things. But I'm very loyal and I'm very focused. And once I got into this kind of career path, I saw that it had financial benefits. As I said, journalism was paying. And I said $8.50 for a staff reporter at the time was not terrible money. I guess 25 years ago, it was still bad. It wasn't good, but I don't think it got progressively that much better for a while there. So that's what I started off as bouncing, and then I also got tips, and then once I found out that I could make a pretty good amount of money working just a few days a week, I always promised myself, well, I'll do this, and then in my off time what I'll do is I'll work on that novel. And then you know what happened? I didn't do that, and I picked up more shifts, and I was like, oh, I'll go down to the bar and I'll hang out, and and I started reading bar books. But at the time, there weren't very many good resources in the early 2000s.
I mean, honestly, we're here to talk about the hospitality industry, but I am hopeful for the world of journalism. And I think what's happening is journalism is now becoming, because I hope that there's still room here, because I want to make this podcast more journalistic in nature. And I think that there's like avenues out there now for people, because the forums or the channels of there's more channels of information out there than ever before. Meaning there was the channels that was on cable, and now there's the internet, and now more and more people, like I'm managing these 2 cameras going around the country telling a story, and there's more ways to fragment the media that are out there. So I think that if anything, I'm hopeful that there's opportunity for. I almost want to like proposition you to come travel the road with me and chase the story, man. Because I know you're passionate about hospitality and journalism now. But or do you still have that interest for journalism, or is that?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And I've done some like industry writing for some publications and stuff, and I would love to continue to do that. And that that'd be a goal of mine, especially once my time becomes a little bit more available. I'd love to do more of that. But
I think the secret is you gotta own your own channel. I think that is the secret behind journalism today, is you have to, but it's a lot of work. Take it from me.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said there are a lot more avenues now.
Yeah.
Let me be very clear. That's 100% true. The democratization of the internet and the way that kind of played out.
Probably the only good thing about
it. Exactly. I mean, well, democracy. I mean, however you want to like phrase that. I mean, I guess maybe it's not always so democratic, but like just in terms of the sources, like, back in the day, it was like you're either on television, you're on radio, or you're in print.
Right.
And then nobody really took like blogs that seriously. And there were some coming up in like certain communities, and obviously there were bulletin board services and things like that in the 90s, but wasn't an avenue for people as a career. Like there were people that struck out, and there was the one blog that got famous or something like that. But you wouldn't make, same thing today. There's millions and millions and billions of people who are writing about stuff online. Not all of them are making money from it.
Right.
They might try to monetize it, but like it's difficult. Like, and think about podcasts in general. Like, everybody's got some sort of advertising now on podcasts, but there's probably a percentage of podcasts that are very sustainable from a financial, aspect in terms of what they get from advertising. And then there's that, and then there's all the rest of the podcasts that don't have that.
That's fair.
I have to interrupt today's episode to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro are taking their relationship to the next level. CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, Fred Langley, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your questions. Here's the thing, I don't want to be a coach, I don't want to be a consultant, but I know the best in the industry, and Fred Langley is the best. He has consistently taken his clients and increased their profit by 10%, and he can help you do the same thing. All you gotta do is click the link below and join a live session in Facebook.
No, I hear what you're saying. So you are kind of just getting further and further into this world. The hospitality kind of sounds like it's sucking you in, but you're not stopping it because you're liking it as you're going. Was there a point where you're like, I just want to do this for the rest of my life? Like, I love the idea of creating and running bar programs.
Yeah, I think it was actually when I got I got fired from a job.
When was this?
This was 2005.
Okay.
I got fired from a job where I thought I was doing great work. It was all I knew in the hospitality industry was working for this one group, and that's where I learned everything. And I got jettisoned because, and as I like to look back through my emails from those days, and I would see all these emails from myself to my general manager and my other assistant general manager just being like, "Oh, I'm so sorry I missed this. I'm so sorry I didn't get this done." I look back and my internal sense was that I was doing a great job, but if I look back at it, I was not doing a great job. I think the final straw was I think I missed a meeting or something. I was hungover and I slept through an alarm. And I missed a meeting and I got fired, and I thought it was the greatest injustice in the world. And I said, how could I get fired from this? I was an outstanding employee for 5 years, and this is ridiculous. And looking back on it, it was probably the right decision. by my boss. And
So looking at your resume, you started young. I see in 07 you're at Hotel Congress, and you're there from 07 to 2011. And then you went to the University of Arizona in 07. So did you go to school late?
oh no, that's when I graduated.
Okay.
So I actually went to university from from 2000 to 2005, and I graduated. I walked, and then afterwards I found out that I was 2 credits shy of my diploma.
Okay.
And so I said, okay, well, I'm just going to take a summer course, and we'll get this out of the way, and then I'll get my BA. And I registered for a summer course, and I was still working in the bar industry, picking up a bunch of shifts, making a bunch of money. And I just didn't do those 2 credits.
So were you working in college when this went down, like when you were this manager? So you had a management job,
Yeah.
and you were working.
Yep.
You're still in college.
Absolutely, yeah.
What were you focusing on in school?
It was creative writing and journalism.
Got it.
And eventually it was creative writing and English. I dropped the journalism thing about halfway through.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I could be a bar manager while in college, for the record. So like the fact that you even got that handed to you, like managing that social life, the school, I mean, that's a big responsibility.
Oh, yeah. And that's why I was not, like, extremely successful at either of them at the time. I think I probably,
I could hardly manage good grades, let alone a job on top of it.
Well, I think, I think the first couple of years of college I did extraordinarily poorly. And then the last 2, I actually tend to do better when I have a lot on my plate. It forces me to do it.
There's a name for that.
There is, and I don't remember what it is either.
But it's this idea that your output is like directly proportionate to the time you're allowed to do it. So like if you limit the time to do something, like you just start doing it. And there's actually restaurant owners that will force their employees to work 40-hour work weeks, and they still expect them to do the same amount of work. But what happens is they're just way more productive because they have to get it done. Like think about how much time is wasted at a restaurant or a bar where people just.
I'm a firm believer in this, and I'm going to say this. Whenever we talk about eventually like welfare of your team members and your employees and everything else, I'm a firm believer that like I don't like 60-hour work weeks. I think it is a complete waste of time for everybody. I know for myself, like after I pass that like 45 to 50-hour threshold, so much of the rest of the time is spent like just sitting there going,
resentment.
God, yeah, like I feel overwhelmed. Oh my God, I can't believe this shift is 12 hours again. And it's really tough. I mean, it's probably a lot more difficult for full service operations that are open, like, well, certainly if they're open breakfast through dinner, but like even just lunch and dinner places that are open all day long and into the evening, you get a lot of management that kind of come in and open the place and they close it down, or they leave pretty close to closing. And I'm imagining that the last 2 to 3 hours of their shift is extremely unproductive. I think they're probably in their worst headspace, and a lot of bad decisions and bad interactions happen with team members.
Right. So if you put a hard stop on it and you give them the same amount of work, and like you just say you got to get it done, then they just focus. It's amazing how that time restrictions forces people to focus, and then they're the beneficiary of that because they get a full 40-hour work week and they get that rest of that time to themselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then like we've got to define priorities, real priorities. I don't mean priorities about like, there are certain things that have to be done that are time sensitive, that are like, hey, if we don't replace the plumbing tomorrow or get the plumbing fixed or the electrical or whatever, like the business is not going to operate. Like those are true priorities that like have to be done right now in the moment. Hey, we've got an event tomorrow. The setup has to be done for that event. But other stuff, like sometimes, I mean, like emails, for instance, and I can go on and on about this, like the amount of extra work that emails create in your life is staggering. I mean, obviously emails can really help a lot of interactions. They can get a lot of things done, but I even find myself doing this, but I find myself sending off an email and doing, okay, done, and I just wash my hands of it because I sent the email to the person. It's good, but now it creates potentially a back and forth, and people will respond back with like one line, or like they don't get the text of the email and you have to go back and forth. I mean, it creates a lot of misunderstandings. They're easy to miss. The volume of emails that we receive now, even if you have your junk filters on and everything else, I mean, I recently was looking for a car, and the amount of emails I got after that from looking for a car was staggering. I mean, it's like 25 to 30 a day, and how, it can easily wash out in a really important communication from somebody. and people will send them at all hours of the day. So, like, sometimes my partner and I are operating on different schedules. He'll get up at 5 a.m., and I'm more of like a 9 a.m. person. And so if he's sending emails at 5, that's a 4-hour gap.
Right.
You know, and maybe there's something important that he needs me to see or something else. You know, and that's just one small example. I mean, think about every distributor, every supplier, every person you work with, every team member you have. Like,
and that's just email. What about your Instagram messaging? What about your Facebook messaging? What about Slack? What about
Slack?
You know, what about what's the other one that we're using right now? It's right here on my computer. I can't remember. It's what's that international one?
Oh, WhatsApp.
You know, it's just like, Jesus. Like,
oh yeah, or one of them, the notification. Like, for a while there, the notifications weren't working for me for WhatsApp, so I'm getting.
Honestly, you know what? I shut all the notifications off.
Yeah, but then, like, you know, people are like, "Hey, these people have been trying to get a hold of you from, you know, Spain or whatever," and I'm like, I don't. Like,
everybody knows that if they need to get a hold of me, if they absolutely need to talk to me, call me.
Yeah,
and then, like, most of the time I'm driving. You know, like, most of the time I'm staring at somebody's face. I'm not staring at my phone. And I think to your point, I think what you're trying to say is there's this unreasonable expectation from people today to make yourself available digitally.
Oh yeah,
and it's unprecedented. Like, when else have we had this challenge? And I think that I don't know if I agree with the, what is it, like 24 hours to get back to somebody. Maybe if you're not somebody who a lot of people want to get in touch with, like, yeah, you know, it's unreasonable.
I mean, now add Slack in there, and Slack's one of those things that I think people have found a lot of success from Slack. I'm one of those people that thinks it's too much. I think it's just another avenue to get emails and texts and things, and, you know, I don't want to have another text messaging service. You know, it's like I look at Instagram. People get on Instagram now and send an Instagram message saying, "Hi, are you open tonight? Hey, can I get a reservation for 8:00?" And they're sending an Instagram message at 7:30 p.m. when we're in the middle of service. Like, who's checking that Instagram at 7:30? I might check it periodically through the night, but, like, I might miss that, right? And then the person who sent that message to me says, like, oh, they didn't get back to me. Like, how rude, right? Even though, like, they didn't go on our website, they didn't use the booking software, they didn't, you know, call, they didn't do any of these other things. They just sent the Instagram message, which Instagram will also sometimes, like, file those messages away in, like, you know, a different column, and you won't see them immediately. And then the other solution is, oh, well, let's get another piece of tech that now automatically responds to our Instagram messages for bookings and tries to, like, you know, be like an AI assistant. And it's like, how many different layers of this can we just use a couple? Like, can there just be a standard method of communication? I don't know if I sound antiquated saying this, but it's like,
it's definitely one of those things that is just like, it's weird. Like, technology is evolving and changing, but I think that we forget that at the end of the day, we're still human, you know? And even, and this might be a stretch, even the idea of just reading all the time. And I don't know, like, hear me out. Like, how long have people been reading? When was the first documented written word? Like 2000, like 21,000 or 2,100 years ago, or something like that. Like 100 years before BC, 200 BC.
Was it Epic?
Or is it 3,000?
Epic of Gilgamesh was like
somewhere in the Fertile Crescent
stories
or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah. I mean, but it's probably earlier than that. Yeah.
But I think they were just using it, like the written word, to, like, track grain and, like, people, or like property or something like that, so they could manage basically tax. And then even then, for the first few thousand years of the written language, it was just the most privileged people that did it. It's only the past couple hundred years that everybody's reading. So I just think in this world of, like, I think reading is important. I think it's a great way to get information out, to flow. But, like, this whole idea of just like spending your whole day looking at screens and reading things is taking us away from what we're meant to do, which is to be with each other, to be in Mother Nature, to be looking into the earth, or like figuring out a skill, hunting, gathering, learning the world around us. You know, like, I think we're so detached from things today because we're just, I don't know, maybe even that's a stretch. But, like, I also think I think more about this because I'm dyslexic, and I'm like, I resent that I'm forced to read things all the time. But put it on an audiobook, a podcast, like, all day long.
Oh, yeah.
7-hour drives, 8-hour drives, audio all day.
Well, it's different also if you're picking up something and reading for information or for pleasure. But when you're being your attention is being constantly diverted to another device that you feel that if you're not checking in on it, that you'll be missing out. It's like that FOMO. It's like developing this constant sense of FOMO in your life, and it's in the background. It's almost like static noise in your life, where you have to constantly check your phone or check your emails, because if you don't, you feel like you're either missing out on an opportunity, missing out on something really important, or falling behind in your work.
Well, I worry about kids. I mean, I was listening to a story of a woman talking about her son who literally gets angry when their friends don't text them back right away or message, and like she'll say like, oh, maybe he just didn't see it, and he's like, no, he's online, I know he saw it. And it's just like, chill, it's crazy. But anyway, man, I'm enjoying the conversation, but I want to get back to your story, because I'm sure our listeners want to get something like some wisdom from your journey. So how did we get down here? We were talking about you got fired.
I got fired, yeah. So I wasn't a great employee at the time, and but in the process of kind of going through a transitional period, I worked. That's when I did work at a few other places. I worked at a pizza joint. I worked at a brewery. I did some management at both places. I got back into bartending. I bartended my own bar for a minute there. Not my own as in I owned it, but I was the sole bartender. There was no bar back. Previously, I'd worked on larger teams. I was high volume bar and restaurant kind of concept stuff. But at that point, it was a smaller place, and I was the only bartender, and I had to do everything. But it also got extraordinarily busy, like 1 or 2 nights a week, where I was just getting killed, and there was no other support. So it taught me a lot of things that I never had to learn previously. Because
what were the biggest lessons?
Managing time, doing a lot of things for myself, a lot of setup and breakdown stuff. I mean, I'd obviously come from a bar backing stance, so like I knew the importance of mise en place, and like, which I didn't know the term at the time, but it was like how to put things everywhere where they need to go. But like being, doing everything yourself, being that bartender behind your own bar and being responsible for everything, plus serving food and serving tables, which is another thing I never did up until that point either. It taught me a lot. It was very humbling. I think that's one of the things that has constantly been a great lesson for me over the course of my career, is just humbling experiences. And I think people use that term humble. They always use it in connection to like getting an award or something like that. But really, when you're humbled by something, it means that you're kind of, you fail to a certain degree. You're being, the force of what you're going against is much greater than what you can bear. And so I wasn't as good as I thought I was. I didn't know as much as I thought I did. And I realized there was a whole galaxy of things that I needed to get better at. And at the
when is this in your story? Like what year is it now?
2000. This is 2005, 2006.
Okay. So all this, dude, I'm looking at your resume from what I got on LinkedIn. It starts on LinkedIn, for the record, in 2007. And the first thing on your resume is Hotel Congress.
Yeah.
And then it goes to the Maynard Market and Kitchen.
Yeah.
And then we have Casino del Sol Resort property.
Yep.
And then Arizona Cocktail Week is when we started crossing paths with Ross. And then Little Rituals, 2017. So we haven't even gotten into what I thought was the beginning of your career. You already owned your own restaurant at this point.
No, I was working for somebody. I was the only employee. Like I was the only. It wasn't my own bar. It was my own bar that I was running, but I wasn't.
Got it.
Yeah, so I worked at a few other places. I ended up getting on Hotel Congress was the job that I ended up getting that really was transformative for me, because
get into that.
Well, in Tucson, which is where I grew up, Hotel Congress has been kind of like a legendary music venue and restaurant and hotel and
is that right
bars.
On, what is it, 4th Street, 5th Street or something?
It's right downtown. It's
Broadway?
like Broadway area. It's like it's right smack in the middle of downtown.
I think I know exactly. I went for a walk in Tucson downtown, and I just looked at this super iconic looking hotel.
Oh yeah,
I was like, that place is cool.
I mean, it's great. There's so many amazing things that have happened there. I mean, just from I love music, and at the time I was very into music, and so being able to run a music venue and have that experience too on my resume was great. But it was so much more than that. It was like there was really an appetite to start developing a cocktail culture, and I just really only put my fingers into it, a few years before, so I didn't have that much experience, but it forced me to get better at it. I came in and there already were people there doing stuff, or there were cocktails that maybe I wasn't like that familiar with when I came on. At the time, I was more a high volume and operations type of person. And I came in there and, it was like mojitos were really popular at the time. And I'd never really worked with mint, not in any sort of larger capacity. So I had a steep learning curve in a lot of different ways. And
Go ahead.
No, that's when I had to start applying myself, and that's when I really sought out books and mentorship. Prior to that, it was forced mentorship. It was people I worked for that I looked up to, and I don't think that's the greatest mentor relationship. But
Why is
like,
that?
Because there's a dynamic of power there there's not an honest communication back and forth. Like, you might be, it's your boss telling you stuff. You might look up to them. You might learn from them. They can still be a mentor, and I think the real mentorship comes later, maybe when you're not working together. But there's still that balance where your boss, has an agenda and you have an agenda, and it's not about your growth necessarily. It's about the business.
Right. What's interesting in my conversations, and I hope this isn't just fluff, but I think more and more people are realizing that when you make the agenda about your employees and figuring out how your business can serve them, they end up serving your business better, and then the guest is the beneficiary of that.
Oh yeah, and it's definitely, a lot of my early relationships with my bosses kind of shaped how I do things now. Kind of like how a lot of people are vow to not be like their parents.
Right.
Yeah. My bar parents, like back in the day, taught me a lot of important lessons that I take to this day and I use. And then they taught me a lot of ways to not be.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think most operators were thinking like this in 2005, 2007. No. I think this is more, I'm hoping I'm getting the word out and making an example of these people who realize it's about relationships and serving everybody, not just the guests. But what were the biggest lessons you learned during this time?
Like always, like certainly it was learning about cocktails was the big thing.
So when you were picking up books, were you picking up cocktail books? Is that what you mean?
Picking up cocktail books, which were really hard to find, in which at the time, Amazon wasn't really.
Dale DeGroff.
Yeah, Dale. I mean, of course, Dale DeGroff was a big one. Craft of the Cocktail. Gary Regan's book, Joy of Mixology, was really huge. I was a voracious reader of that. One of the things you would do too, in that time period was go on websites for bars in big cities like Death & Co. When Death & Co. first opened and they had their menu online, everyone would just download it and just study it obsessively. And you may never have been there and you may never have experienced it, but we would just look at all the stuff they were doing, and then we'd immediately start going, where can we get this stuff from? What is this? Never heard of it before. And then you would go down these kind of rabbit holes and sort of learn about all these things. And you might be learning entirely different than the way they might have intended these things, because you didn't taste the drink, you didn't know the ingredients. And so there still wasn't a tremendous amount of information online, but I will say that at that time it was starting to explode.
Yeah.
Like 2007 was really the time where you could start finding that stuff. And so luckily I had that resource, and then I kind of found a few mentors. And I think that came through because at Hotel Congress, we were involved in a few festivals and things, and I got a chance to meet Dale DeGroff. I got a chance to meet Tony Abou-Ganim, who I consider one of the most fantastic.
Is he in Miami or California?
He's actually in Las Vegas.
Okay.
He has a bar there in the Mandalay Bay, and he has influenced so many people in this industry, and I think. The tendency sometimes from people is to regard like the old bartenders as, oh yeah, well that they do all that stuff that they used to do, and we're the new Turks, and we're doing everything this new way and the way it should be done now, and everything's modern. But like we wouldn't have the industry that we have right now without people like Tony, without people like Dale. And I think Tony was an advocate for me, and he taught me self-confidence in the industry, and just the fact that he is one of those people who is so warm and so genuine, and he remembers you.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that I feel like is the most important thing in this industry, is like genuine interest and warmth to other people, which is hospitality really in a lot of ways, but just the way he would connect with people at his seminars and that he met.
So is that where you met him, is through the seminars?
I met him through Hotel Congress, through some competition stuff, but then I went and I sought out his seminars, and I went to Las Vegas for Bar and Nightclub at the time and saw his seminars, and they did fresh juice. They were doing fresh juice seminars. Because
he gave you confidence through going to his sessions?
Yeah, I mean, just the way he would talk to me, and he would remember me, and he would, he would just little things he would say, or like, little positive things. It wasn't just a sign the book and move on type of thing. He said really complimentary things. He was very nice.
Do you remember what he said?
Oh,
paraphrase.
Well, I mean, it's less about what he said, just more about how he made you feel by saying it. And he didn't have to do a lot, but he was definitely one of those people.
What is that expression? Who said it? People will forget what you said, but they'll never forget how they made you feel.
100%.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
Maya Angelou, maybe?
Doesn't everything get attributed to Maya Angelou? I think.
don't know.
You know,
I'd look it up, but I lost.
you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Maya Angelou.
I think that was Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely that was, you know, he was extraordinarily impactful. You know, there were a lot of people like that. Dale DeGroff, just a lot of those kind of original bartending crew that kind of ushered in the quote unquote age of mixology.
Yeah, and I think, you know, really it's just how important, like, do you make people feel seen? And I think we forget at the end of the day that it's so important to people is being seen, being valued. I don't know about you, but I don't go. I mean, you're somebody who's very passionate about cocktails, so this might be a little bit different. I don't go to a bar based off of the quality of the drinks that are being made. I go off the quality of the people that are behind it, who in like the relationships with the restaurant. Like that's what pulls me in.
And I think you're actually you have more in common with most people than,
Yeah.
you know, I think there is we tend to forget, you know, in the craft cocktail circuit, we tend to forget what a small percentage our bars and our restaurants are in comparison to all the bars and restaurants in the world.
Right.
There's only a very small handful that are doing stuff the way that we're doing it, and the rest of everything else is, you know, also amazing restaurants that make people very happy and bars that make people very happy.
Right.
You know, bartenders who go out on the town generally aren't going out and drinking cocktails. They're going to get a shot and a beer somewhere in there. Like, we love going to this
Same thing
bar.
with chefs. They
Exactly.
they work so hard cooking for everybody else. They get home and they make a PB and J. They're like,
Yeah.
they're just exhausted.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, I think it's just important to have perspective, and you know, and it comes down to hospitality. And I think that's I look at myself less and less as I go through this journey in this industry. I look at myself less and less as a bartender or somebody who's focused on cocktails, and more somebody who's focused on the overall experience, because I'm still learning. I mean, the amount of stuff that I've had to learn for this place just alone, that I didn't necessarily have those skills because I focused so intently, which I do think it's important to pick a lane and really, you know, excel in it. But at the same time, I didn't have a really strong background in serving. I didn't have a really strong background in food at times. And I've paid the price for it as an operator. These are all things that I've had to learn the hard way. And I wish that I'd had a little bit more varied experience in my background. You know, I do think it's crazy to be changing your job every 6 months. But, you know, I do think, you know, you do need to get some different experience, and you need to learn from places, you know, that have something to teach.
Yeah. I think I lean, if I had to pick, you kind of showed the value of both sides. Do you become a specialist, or do you become a jack of all trades, right? And I think as we move into the future, as the industry gets more and more competitive, I think if I'm playing the bet, I think you become a specialist. I think that the value in today's world is knowing your lane, staying in it, and going further together. I don't think you can be everything to everybody anymore. Like, I think the days of being a solopreneur restaurateur or a solo restaurateur, solo restaurateur, I don't know how you'd abbreviate that, but it's harder and harder because there's so much more expected from the restaurant owner. The experience, a great bar program, a great food program, a great front of house experience, and to find the people to attract onto yourself to take those positions and to own them when they could literally own their own position. I don't know, like, where do you think we're going if this is the case, where if it's getting more and more, and to your point, like, you've got to constantly be learning because the industry around us is dynamic and constantly changing and progressing.
I mean, I do agree with some of that. I would say that it is still important for people to have a bit of flexibility. You know, I in my position at the Casino del Sol, I was the property mixologist, so which is a job that Tony Aboganam actually helped me get into. Years later, that connection I made kind of came full circle, and he got me into that job. And it was a very great job, and it really cemented that this is what I was going to do for the rest of my life. But at the same time, it was very segmented. It was compartmentalized, I should say. I only did cocktails there. I only did the beverage program. I only worked on that kind of stuff. I didn't really manage the restaurant. I didn't really get into that stuff. I didn't host. I didn't learn open table. I didn't do any of these kind of things. And without doing those things, because as an owner, if you want to be an owner, you have to learn that stuff. That's what the difference I could say. If you want to be a sommelier, you probably can really stick in that lane, and you have to because of the amount of specialized knowledge that you need to accumulate to be a top-level som. But, like, in terms of if you want to be an owner, you have to be able to wear all these hats.
Right.
There's just not an opportunity to not have that information.
What are your thoughts on just, like, sharing equity in the business with specialists?
I mean, I think if you design your business that way, it could work. I think from the ground up. It's very hard to probably retcon something like you can't go back necessarily in a partnership agreement that you have. It's very difficult, let's say you had a partnership agreement with 2 other people, to have a conversation with them and say, hey, guys, we're going to start sharing equity with the team. Everyone would have to be on board with that.
Right.
So it's a lot easier to have that kind of model in mind when you go into that.
I don't
concept.
think a lot of people even know that model is an option, and I think that they're fearful. I think a lot of what we learn is the more you give, the more equity to give up. I mean, it's weird. I think it's counterintuitive, and I don't know, like I'm not one or the other. But if I'm being honest with myself, like I know, so say if I'm opening a restaurant tomorrow, I know I still want to have a podcast. You know what I'm saying? So, like, am I going to be able to host a podcast and travel the country and open and run a restaurant?
I think that would be very difficult.
Right.
For the record, I'm not trying to dissuade you from doing it, but
but yeah, exactly. Yeah. It would be very difficult. But there's still a part of me that's like, I'm learning all this stuff. I want to see if I've actually learned something, right? So if I were to start a business and then just have to take a percentage of profit, but if I was the one putting up all the risk, right, and recruiting the team members, but I also am uniquely positioned to recruit people because I have this massive audience of passionate restaurant people. So if I could generate enough money with this podcast to go buy a piece of property or to buy assets and then to put together operators and say, hey, I can't do this without you. Like, I want you to treat it like you own it. And as a matter of fact, like, if you put up, say we're starting as like a super small, like something attainable. If you put up like 2% of equity, then I'll profit share with you and you'll own a piece of it. And like, I think we're seeing more and more people realizing if I want to scale and if I want to attract onto myself the best talent, they're going to want skin in the game, and I don't know how else you attract people. Other than just a great culture, but at the end of the day, if you want people who are going to stick around for more than a year, they're going to need some reason to stick around.
Yeah, I think it's probably a lot easier to just focus entirely on sort of profit sharing as opposed to giving people like equity in the business because
I don't think you just give it to them. I think you make them
I mean, definitely you can. Yeah, I mean, and again, that's something that's probably a lot cleaner and easier at the beginning of the job. I mean, obviously, there are lots of people who are extremely successful in the restaurant industry who aren't hands-on day-to-day with their restaurants, but it takes somebody who can build, like like you're kind of talking about, what if I continue to go around and do this, but I also had a restaurant and I got the right people in to essentially build it and run it. And that's totally doable. And it's down to having the key people and having, people who are really invested in and believe in the concept from day one. It's very doable.
I mean, aren't you kind of a living example of this? Because you, we haven't gotten to this point where you cross paths with Ross yet, right? That's in 2016, 15, I'm assuming.
Oh, we actually met earlier than that, but I think I want to say that we kind of met back in 2009 or 2010.
At this point, had he opened Twisted and Bitter?
No.
So that's 2012, right?
Yeah. So they're going to be they're celebrating their 10-year anniversary this year, which is crazy.
So did somebody approach him for? I know we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. We're actually kind of on par for where we should be at this point in the conversation. Is when you started your partnerships, but when he approached you, for the sake of where we are in our conversation, did you approach him? Did he approach you about this space? Like, how did the space Little Rituals get in your radar?
Well, the way this worked, and I think I met Ross because somebody set up a meet cute for us where they were like, "Hey, this
meet cute."
Oh, so it's like a movie term. It's like when in the romantic story when the two romantic comedy, the two people are like introduced to each other. But Ross is he's Scottish and he's I'll say that he's Scottish. So he he's very opinionated, and so somebody was like, "Hey, I know this guy who's really into bars, and he wants to open a bar in Arizona, and I bet you'd probably like him. You guys have a lot of similar opinions." And so somebody set, and he was a liquor rep at the time when he had moved here. And somebody set up this, like, why don't you go have a drink with him and talk to him about bars? So we went and we sat at this little Mexican restaurant in Tucson in a resort. And it was kind of like breaking the ice at first, and we didn't have a lot to talk about. And then I think one of us, it might have been him, kind of looked behind the bar and was, he's like, that back bar is shite or something like that, and then we immediately started talking about it, and we started talking about the distance between the back bar and the front bar, and like, how inconvenient it was, and what's the appropriate distance, and how far should these coolers swing out and everything. And that's
he brought me behind the bar at Twisted and Bitter, and he was so proud of the little details. Like you can tell he's super attention to detail oriented.
Yeah, no, he absolutely is, and that's kind of how we got started being friends, is just sort of talking about that kind of stuff and really bonding on that. And then we got involved through the Bartenders Guild, United States Bartenders Guild.
So was this when he was still working for the distributor?
Yeah, he was working for.
And he was like doing a lot of educational stuff.
Yeah, he was going around and doing that, and those type of jobs afford you the ability to meet a lot of people in the industry. And what he was trying to do, because he had moved here from London, and he was trying to open a bar here in Arizona. And he was pitching it to anybody that he could, and just could not get anyone to see the vision of having a cocktail bar in Arizona. And I was doing the same thing in Tucson with less resources. So we were in different cities, and we would talk about it, and he would call me all the time and talk to me about kind of like what he's going through up here and where he is in the process. And then he had a lot of meetings with a lot of investors, which is something I'm not particularly good at, and he is, because he just will go and find the people who just say, here it is. And I'm not like that. I'm a little bit more timid. I have a lot of imposter syndrome, and
you're telling me.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't really feel like what I'm going to offer is really worthwhile. And, he was a lot more, ballsy, and just kind of got these meetings. So he ended up getting the funding. He found a partner that was willing to take the chance, and he found the right location. It was a location he really wanted, and he believed in it, even though down here 10 years ago was not a great scene. Downtown Phoenix was kind of a shell at the time. And so he was the first one going in, and it was going to be a test case.
Kind of interesting how bars and restaurants are the first ones to go in. Huh?
Yeah. I mean, if it wasn't for the bar, I mean, there's some art stuff in downtown Phoenix, but even that, like, it needs kind of the infrastructure of the bars and restaurants around it to sort of support. It's a mutually beneficial relationship for both of those type of businesses. But
was the stadium here 10 years ago?
The stadium was here, but like there was, there's a lot of stuff that's grown up around the stadium's always been there, like these kind of beer places that I don't think anyone's ever been in unless they were going to the game. They're not like bars that you would necessarily go to on like a Friday or Saturday or even a Thursday. Definitely not a Thursday or a Tuesday. You really only go to them to have a beer before going into the sporting game.
So I know you guys started the cocktail weekend.
Yes.
Before partnering on Little Ritual. And I know we're getting ahead of ourselves, but I guess what I want to know is, did he find this space? Was he propositioned on this space? I'm assuming he was, because he was right next door, and he had developed a name for himself. At this point, were you guys talking about partnering before the space came on the radar, or like was it your vision?
Well, so the investor that he has with Bitter and Twisted decided to build a hotel next door.
Okay.
And so that company, the Hanji Corporation, decided to build this hotel that we're sitting in right next door to Bitter and Twisted. And so there wasn't, I don't think initially, any kind of thought put into, will there be a bar in this hotel? But it just turned out that there's this fourth floor space here that was kind of a Marriott bar space, if you will, like event space, that was just not being utilized. And I think at the time, 2017, his partner kind of looked at the space and said, Bitter and Twisted is really starting to make a name for itself nationally and globally. It would be really cool to have another property like that.
Yeah,
another
to piggyback off that success.
So and downtown was starting to pick up some steam, and so he said, what do you think, Ross, about doing something in this space? And I think, Ross and I had been talking forever, and I think basically Ross was just like, there's one person I'm going to call, and it was me.
And he gave you equity in the business.
Yeah.
Would you have taken the opportunity if he didn't?
No, because I actually had turned down a lot of other opportunities where there wasn't really a promise of equity, or there wasn't really
See where I'm going with this?
yeah. Right. I mean, it would have been a lot easier. Like,
I think for the right people, and you guys had a special relationship because you built the cocktail weekend with him. So I think part of success in this industry is when you see talent, when you see passion, you hang on to that passion. You create opportunity for that passion. You go further together because he couldn't do both things, right? Like you need to, but like because you're here and because he's sharing in the success of it, the two of you go further together. Is that safe to say?
Oh yeah, and I mean I'm a big proponent of partnerships in F&B operations. I think like it's very tough to do things on your own, and I couldn't imagine doing a place like this by myself and not having somebody else that has that experience, or somebody else to you need somebody to check your worst impulses and sort of elevate your best ones. Like
I have to interrupt today's episode to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro are taking their relationship to the next level. CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, Fred Langley, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your questions. Here's the thing, I don't want to be a coach, I don't want to be a consultant, but I know the best in the industry, and Fred Langley is the best. He has consistently taken his clients and increased their profit by 10%, and he can help you do the same thing. All you gotta do is click the link below and join a live session in Facebook.
And I'm not saying it's all like butterflies and rainbows, partnerships and sharing equity. There's a lot of stress associated with that.
Oh, sure.
But most of the people that aren't good at that are usually huge assholes who aren't good at managing relationships.
With the Arizona Cocktail Weekend, I originally was not a founder or partner. I was just somebody who'd been around from the beginning, being a part of it because of my role in the community. And there was another group of very influential Phoenix bartenders and personalities that were involved in the initial sort of conception of that. And as time went on, each of them moved on to their respective projects and roles, and kind of found themselves just overwhelmed with the prospect of doing Arizona Cocktail Weekend every year, because for many years it was not a successful operation.
Wasn't the purpose of that for him to, I think you were kind of getting to this, that you were both struggling. He was trying to convince Phoenix that there needed to be a cocktail scene. You were trying to convince Tucson that there needed to be a cocktail scene. But in order for that to happen, you had to inject a cocktail culture into the community.
And that was what Arizona Cocktail Weekend was. Like, that was the genesis of it. But, like any other, it is a business. And even though there's a charitable component to it, it still needs to thrive, and it needs to be financially viable. And for many years it wasn't. It was a complete labor of love. And there's only so many years you can operate like that with something that could potentially take 6 months of your time every year. Planning,
permitting,
executing, all this different stuff.
Promoting.
It's great to expose people to the culture. It's great to bring people to town and everything else. And it does help the community as a whole, and it does, build stuff up. But eventually it's kind of diminishing returns in that respect. There needs to be a light at the end of the tunnel. Like, if I'm going to put, it's like as you get older, I think when I was younger, it was like, oh, this is something cool. I'll always jump into things for free, and I'll do these things for free. And eventually you get to a point you go, I'm going to start thinking about like my future, and like, I'm doing all these things for free, and I see people out there getting paid for it. Why am I not getting paid for it? So you do have to sort of draw the line, and there's things you can do for free and for the good of the community, and there's things that need to make you some sort of return. And I think, part of it was just being smarter about how we were running the weekend, and trying to get the right people in the right places, and actually paying people for what they were doing, as opposed to more like volunteer type of opportunities. So we think we're in a really great place now. I joined the partnership, I think, in 2017. And now it's just Ross and myself.
Got it. One thing we skipped over in your story, and I want to make sure it comes out, is when did you say to yourself, I want to own a bar? Like, when did that come into your mind?
Oh, pretty early on, I think. I would say, like, even in the even when I was back still in the aughts, I guess.
So all this time that you were working in bars, you were trying to get the experience you need to one day own your own bar.
Yeah, I always thought about it. I was like, oh, I'd love to own a bar. Like, I think I probably wanted to own a bar before I decided that I actually wanted to work in a bar for the rest of my life. I was like, owning a bar would be awesome. I didn't really know at the time what that would entail.
So while you're, I went over your resume, but am I looking at the right one right now? Here it is. So 07 to 11. So basically 4 years you were at the Hotel Congress, where you really grew the most, where you kind of fell in love with the world of the cocktail scene, right?
Yeah.
And then from 09 to 11, so you had two things going on. You were doing the Maynard Market and Kitchen.
Yeah.
So you had two jobs.
Yeah. So we opened a property across the street, and I was Hotel Congress is very funny. They really like to have you do a lot of stuff and not give you the title. So I was the beverage director for the company.
So 4 years of that company.
Yeah.
And then were you continuing?
Well, it probably says I was a bar manager, because my title was bar manager, but I was the beverage director for the company. So they had me open up this restaurant across the street and do all the stuff, do all the ordering, all the menus, all the cocktails, all the wine for the market and for the upstairs, and then all of the bars inside of the hotel, all of the events, run the nightclub, do all that kind of stuff. And they would not give me a title that was more than bar manager. And that actually, I will say this, and I should say this, businesses need to be really careful about what they're doing with this, because it does impact their team members, their employees forever.
What do you mean? What exactly?
Well, when I left Hotel Congress to go to my next job, I could never get the title of beverage, which was
Casino.
Yeah, same thing. I went to the casino, and they're even more corporate, and so
is that here in Phoenix, or is that?
It's in Tucson.
Okay.
They wouldn't give me a beverage director position because I had no director experience. So if I'd had director experience from my previous job, I probably could have become beverage director.
So why is this important?
For one, that would have given me probably a pay increase of about $30,000 a year.
Okay.
But because I didn't have that experience, and because of my titling and my experience and the way I'd always been a bar manager, which is why today on my business card here at Little Rituals, it says bar director. And the only reason I put that on there is because I'd never had director associated with my name. Even though I owned the place, I didn't put owner on there. I just put bar director. Because I was just like, yeah, I can do whatever I want now. I'm going to call myself bar director.
Nice. Do you think that the reason why people hold title is so they can get away with paying them less? Is that the sole purpose?
No, not necessarily. Now they do the reverse, where a lot of places give people beverage director titles and they pay them like shit.
So they're stroking the ego.
Yeah, it's more title, like... Yeah, there's a lot of people who are like, it's weird for me to see people who've been in the industry for 2 years getting a beverage director position, because it's just like, to me, that's like, it's very... And they might get that title and not do any of the roles that a real beverage director would do. They might just...
What are the differences, the real roles a beverage director does?
A beverage director is thinking a lot more big picture, and they're thinking, and they're really in control entirely of the beverage operation as a whole. Whereas a lot of people who are essentially a lead bartender somewhere who just does the ordering every week.
The director is basically saying they're writing the menu, they're doing the creative, they're paying attention to trends, they're really thinking about the whole, from soup to nuts, everything associated with the contracts,
hiring, partnerships, just what kind of culture they're going to develop, what kind of directions they're going to have with all the different outlets. Usually it's something that's usually reserved for like a more multi venue, or like, if you have a couple different bars somewhere, or a couple different points of sale, a beverage director is more impactful in that type of situation than a beverage director for one singular, like this bar, for instance. Maybe if we had a beverage director for this bar and for Bitter and Twisted, that would be a good positioning. But like, here you don't necessarily need that. But like, I kind of fill that role. But yeah, I mean, it's like it's developing that culture. It's looking after every aspect of the entire beverage offering, essentially. So I think that's like, it did hurt that I didn't have that title, but I also think it's being kind of bandied around really loosely now, and just kind of thrown out there as like I do think a lot of places are like, yeah, well, how about a beverage director role? We'll pay you $19 an hour plus tips.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking director of beverage. I'm thinking of somebody like, with Fox, we had Regan's Jasper, and then Matt Snap stepped into his place, but they were like training, developing the program, researching the drinks, selecting the drinks, pricing the drinks, costing, all this stuff, like really the economics and the operations behind the program.
Yeah, exactly.
Marketing, marketing,
all the stuff that
economics.
actually makes you the money, that actually really drives the profit for the business.
Right. So, I mean, do we just want to skim over your 6 years at Casino del Sol Resort property? I mean, was there? Am I saying that right?
Casino del Sol?
Okay, thank you. What did I say before? Del Sort?
Del Sort, yeah.
My
Might as well.
dyslexia is flaring up. Casino del Sol Resort property. So that was 6 years.
6 years.
So-
Again, that was one of those situations where I think I was there for too long. I think probably after year 5.
Yeah. What is a good balance? I think a year minimum.
I think a year minimum too. One of your other guests previously said 1 year. It might have been Souther Teague, but said 1 year is what he has his team members. He's like, give me 1 year and I will be with you for life. And I loved that. That was an amazing statement. I kind of feel the same way. I also don't think you should leave necessarily just for the sake of leaving. But, if you're going to leave, have a purpose.
Right.
It goes back to what I was saying in the beginning of this, like act with purpose, like have an agenda for what you're doing.
Yeah. If they're going to put the time and energy to train you and to give you the skills, like then give them their ROI, right?
Yeah.
I think is what it comes down to. Just the time and energy to find somebody to replace you, is a burden, let alone the money spent to train you. So, what are you thinking?
I mean, I think definitely a good amount of time is probably 2 to 3 years. I think that's, that gives you enough time to really, because you want to master what you're doing, man. Like that's the thing is people put so much emphasis on, I want to learn new things. I want to go somewhere else and make different cocktails. And I'm like, but how good are you at doing the thing that you were hired for initially? Like, can you honestly say you're walking away from this job at the top of your game? If you're not, then there's lots more things to learn.
Right.
It's repetition. It's really getting good at this stuff. It's like why we preach the classics. It's why chefs preach like all of the basics first. You've got to be able to do the job before you do the job. Like you can't just go. I always say to people here when I hire them on, I bring them on as a bartender. I say, when you leave here, my goal is for you to be able to go out and get a job anywhere else in the world. And I want with confidence, and I want those places to look at this resume and see this place on there and be like, oh shit, we got to hire this person.
Yeah.
That's what I want out of my team members. Like, I will consider myself a success if that is the case.
Yeah.
And
keep going. I don't want to cut you short.
No, please.
No. So I just wanted to talk. I mean, it sounds like you and Ross cross paths first with just there was an introduction. You guys were in the same social circles. It sounds like he led the charge on the cocktail weekend, and then now you're a partner in that.
Yes.
How did that evolve? I'm curious because that started before you became partners here.
Yeah, I mean, I was volunteering. I was volunteering my time for years as part of Cocktail Weekend, and then I was getting paid a very minimal amount of money just to say, hey, thank you so much for coming and doing this. And I was at the time we were originally trying to do Arizona Cocktail Weekend statewide and trying to do something in Tucson too. So for a few years, I put together a Tucson component of Arizona Cocktail Weekend. But it's very hard to do that. It's hard to get buy-in in another city where most of the events are not in the city you're in. Kind of like if a Tales of the Cocktail was to say like, yeah, it's Tales of the Cocktail, but like
Chicago.
Yeah, what do you? Yeah, Now they do a thing where they've done like satellite Tales of the Cocktail events, and that's great. It's just like if at the same time everyone was in New Orleans, they're like, yeah, you celebrate too over there in Shreveport. Like I don't know that that's going to be successful. Like I think it's good to have sort of an epicenter. So over time, when I moved up here, I got more involved, and I kind of made the decision to move up here. I'd invested in another Phoenix bar initially with Jason Asher, which was Undertow, which was his one of his first concepts.
Yeah, he's on my list of people I should get on this show.
Yeah, he's definitely one of those people that's been a guiding force for me. Somebody I've always looked up to, and then also been a contemporary of. And I was part of investing in Undertow, and I had a few drinks on the menu when that opened. But ultimately, what brought me up here, and that was when I still lived in Tucson. But what brought me up here was this opportunity because I wanted to be a part of something that I started myself, and that I actually had DNA in. It wasn't just me being a part of somebody else's company. It was me starting it from the ground up.
Yeah. So when the conversation to start this started really happening, like were you doing anything to like protect yourself, or like what advice do you have in like to go into a partnership?
Oh, okay. So luckily I had a great experience with this place. And Ross and my other partner in this business, they're very straightforward, amazing people to work with. And they have the same advice as I will give everyone, which is get it in writing. Get it in writing.
Your partners were giving you the advice to get it in writing with them.
Well, they offered that. That was it was in writing. I wouldn't have done it if it wasn't. But like, there are so many people out there in the restaurant and bar world, chefs, bartenders, and they'll come into your bar and they'll sit across from you and go, "I'm opening a bar. Like, you got to come see me at my new bar. Like, I'm an owner finally." All this other stuff, and then 5 months later, they're back in your bar having a beer. "I got fired today." "Oh, you got fired? You got fired from your own bar, huh?" "Well, yeah. I guess like like they were going to give me all this, and they were going to give me the contract, and they just didn't do it." And don't engage in something unless you have really clear, delineated roles, responsibilities, a contract,
signatures.
Ownership. And even with that, you have to remember that if you have a small stake in a business, you can still be ousted.
Yeah, you can still get fired from your partner.
Yeah, you can be out. They can just be like, "Hey, yeah." But at least if you have it in writing and you have a specific thing set up, you'll get some money out of it. You'll get paid to leave.
Yeah, and you have to have some clearly documented things. You got to be a true dingleberry to get fired from equity in your business.
Correct.
But if you don't have anything written in paper, like they can just choose to fire you. And so like you gotta like. If you're not doing what you agreed to do, you should be fired. And you should have the paperwork in there that says, "I am responsible for these things. And yes, I agree that if I don't do these things and I don't carry my share of responsibility, that the other partners can choose to fire me." Like, that should be worked into it.
Sure. And there is. There's a lot of cold, hard realities in this business that, I think people see more in popular culture, in like tech. They think of tech startups and things like that, that's where the people are getting their first taste of like what ownership in a business is. And they're like, "How is this CEO owner being fired from their own, place?" And it's like, well, there's a board of directors. Like, there's different levels, and most bars don't have a board of directors, but maybe some restaurant groups do, for sure.
Were there any challenges for you as a first-time owner?
Oh, yeah. The biggest challenge was uprooting my whole life, coming up here for something that was not a sure bet, something that could have been a colossal failure.
How was that challenging?
Well, I sold my house. I moved up here with my future wife, and, I had no job. Like, I came up here, I had no source of income. We thought we were going to open, 5 months after I moved up here. It ended up being a year and 2 months. So, lots of different things. I don't think I was fully prepared for the reality of construction delays and just the glacial pace at which this can sometimes work. I think everybody thinks best case scenarios, and they go, "Oh yeah, how long could it really take?" And for this place, you would think it could have been a 3-month turnaround, because it was an existing space inside of a previously existing.
The hotel didn't put you up?
Brand new. No, the hotel did not put me up. But, it's a brand new building. Everything was already here. They're like, "Oh, what are you going to do? You just put some wallpaper up and some furniture, and you're good to go." But it turned out there were so many different things. We had to demo everything that was in this room. We had to redo every single surface, every single.
Why was it had to?
Because it was all white. Okay. It was. I wish I could show you. I'm sure I could show you pictures later, but it was a.
I don't think I see any white in this place.
It was a sterile. It was a sterile environment.
Maybe that wall right there. Sorry, there's a little bit of white.
Yeah. Well, even this was a new addition over here, but recently. But when we did this, this wall didn't exist here. There was there was a wall back there towards where the restrooms were. We had to blow out that wall. There was an existing bar in here that might have been built for, I don't know, what kind of a creature, both a tall and short creature at the same time, with really long arms. It was, every distance was wrong, so we had to demolish that.
Seeing Ross, and I'm sure you're probably very similar to Ross, but seeing Ross walk behind his bar over at Bitter and Twisted and get into all the details of how he designed it. If he's going to own a bar, I'm sure that he's going to have a lot of control over the ergonomics of that bar.
Absolutely, and that's what we did. We agonized over it. I remember coming in here and measuring the bar top distance over and over and over again. And then even after they did the equipment install, I freaked out and I called Ross and I said, "It's all wrong. I'm looking at it and it's all wrong." And then when we came back, we remeasured and I was like, "No, it's right." It just looks, because we got it down to the inch on some of these things.
I just want to pull something from the experience before we start, learning from a different experience. But you said, you moved. The biggest challenge was moving from Tucson up to Arizona, thinking you're going to be 5 months working on opening this thing, turning into a year and a couple months. What is the advice? Like, what advice do you have to somebody? Like, maybe get into the agreement with what would you do? Like, have some type of runway? Like,
yeah, I mean, I'm not very good at my own financial planning in a lot of ways. I've gotten a lot better, but like I think at the time I was still. I just thought, okay, it'll be fine. Like, I have a little bit of money, and I just didn't have it
from selling the house.
From selling the house, from cashing in my vacation time from the casino, things like that. I thought I was, I really underestimated. Again, this is the lesson would be like, you have to overestimate. Like, it's going to take longer than you think it is. It's
Always.
going to have, and I just didn't think about that. I knew it. I knew it from listening to podcasts or from learning and going to seminars and everything, but like I just didn't apply it to my own life, and I was like, oh, it'll be fine. And then when we got into these kind of situations where we couldn't find a general contractor for 6 months, like there just wasn't anyone at the time available to do the work. We had all the stuff there. We just sitting there waiting for somebody to show up to do it. Little things like that. Plumbing, like we determined that we needed an extra drain, and in this hotel we had to pay, I don't know, it was like $100,000 to do imaging, like of the floors, to try to find out where is the other plumbing in this building so that we don't cause a massive multi-million-dollar disaster in this hotel.
Right.
Like, so there was like all these different financial things, and
especially when you're working with corporate.
Yeah.
Then there's like the time just to get things.
Oh yeah, turnaround stuff. I mean, and all things considered, it went pretty quickly once the work started. Like, honestly, once the work started and everything, we also had a really weird situation where we had an architect we were working with in an interior designing firm to do this initially, and after working with them for 6 months, they basically just ghosted us just didn't. We ended up just calling the person who built the hotel and being like, all right, we're going to work on this. Like in a process of 2 months, we completely picked every finishing furniture, every single thing in this building. We did ourselves essentially. And even in the beginning with the company that we had hired, we had provided them with not a CAD drawing, but similar to a CAD drawing of exactly where we wanted everything. So they didn't have to do any work, but they just kept kicking the can down the road. And then the person who worked with us, the architect for the architecture firm, left the firm, and no one responded to us for months to tell us this person was gone. And at the end, we were just like, all right, we're going to take what we got and we're going to move on.
Yeah. So I'm guessing it was the end of 2017 that you basically moved out of Tucson, came up here, and it rolled in through 2018 and into 2019 when you finally opened. Is that what happened?
Yeah, we opened in January of 2019.
Got it. So 5 years. You just celebrated your 5th year.
We did. Late, of course, because
we were busy.
Well, our actual kind of like anniversary is over cocktail weekend. And so I am not available during cocktail weekend, and a lot of other things happened this year. We had a lot of situations here with the kitchen and with team members, and it became impossible to think about trying to plan some sort of event.
So in the 5 years, what were, like, help me and the listeners understand what kind of success have you had?
I mean, we've had a lot of really good recognition nationally and internationally for the quality of this bar, which is always great. It's great to have those recognition awards. Are always awesome when you win them, and they suck when you don't. I think those are most important for our team to really just reaffirm that what we're doing is being recognized. But I think just being a busy bar after 5 years is the most important thing,
right.
And ultimately, I don't care if I ever win an award. I just want to have a place that functions, that I can feel proud about, that pays my bills and pays the bills for all the people that work with me. And it needs to be financially viable.
So what are the secrets to getting the bills paid? Like, what are you doing here? What does a successful operation look like in the back end, the guts?
I mean, a lot of it is just really, you have to have the bedrock of the concept needs to be financially viable. You have to know how many people you need to come in the door. You have to have all your costs figured out. You have to have recipe cards for every food item, for every drink item. You have to have ways to track people who come in and how much they spend, and things that we didn't even think about 20 years ago.
What are you doing to use all those things? Where did you go to learn these things?
I mean, a lot of it's seminars. You can go to seminars at these big conventions. A lot of it you can learn online. I love listening to audiobooks. Sometimes I'll put on, like, I have an audiobook that was the book was written, I want to say it was written at least 15 years ago or something like that. There's been an update on it, but it's like a restaurant success book. And
Restaurant Success by the Numbers?
Yes, Restaurant Success by the Numbers. That's the book. I have an audiobook version of that, and I will listen to it over and over again, even though some of the stuff now is maybe like dated, whatever software or things they recommend are obviously, anytime you hear about anything, it's always dated. It's always 2 years, if it's in a book. But like the principles of that, just reaffirming them, having them drilled into my head. Like,
what are the biggest principles?
I mean, it's just doing everything with intention and understanding how you're actually going to make money from this business. So
reverse engineering it from the start to be profitable.
Yeah, you have to think about, like, you can have what you consider to be a great concept. And there's so many different things that make something a great concept. Like, can you actually execute it? Like, does the public want it? Is there room for that in your market? Like, past all of those different things, you can have all that and still make no money. You can have a business that has thousands of people through it every week and make not $1 because you didn't consider this, like, how to manipulate the square footage. Was your square footage adequate for what you're trying to do? Like, are you operating correctly? Like, one of the biggest challenges we had with this place in the first year we were open was that we would get very busy for 2 hours a day. And this is not the business that can sustain on 2 hours a day. We're a seated cocktail bar. We've got 75 seats. So in 2 hours, that's basically one turn.
Right.
So people were treating it like a nightclub. And on Fridays and Saturdays, we would get a line out the door. We had no reservations. It was first come, first serve, and we had a wait list. People would show up at 9 or 10 o'clock. We'd get a couple hours of really strong business. The bar would be just overwhelmed and busy. And then after that, nothing for the last 45 minutes, and nothing up until 9 o'clock.
So when was this in the journey? You opened in 2019. When did this challenge become apparent?
Immediately.
I
mean, we had a lot of challenges too. Like, we're on the 4th floor of a hotel. It's not a conventional hotel that a cocktail bar would be in.
I was sitting on these questions I had.
Oh,
I was like, because that has to be like, you do have a sign. So, like, I guess
we didn't have a sign for the first 5 months.
Okay.
That was a challenge. That was one of those things where it's like we could not get a permit, or we could not get the company that was building the sign. Again, like little things like that you just don't expect would be a challenge.
So how do you? I mean, I was here. I recorded with Ross last week. I think I was here at like 5 or 6. I came by. When was I? Do you know when I was here?
Oh, it was
You were open. And what time do you open? 4 o'clock? 5 o'clock?
5. Yeah.
So it was after 5.
Yeah.
I was here, and there was business. You
Yeah.
know, not every seat was full, but it wasn't the peak drinking hours, like
Right.
as far as like cocktail bar goes. And there was business. I think it was like a Wednesday.
Yeah.
So like you've overcome that.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent. I mean, it kind of comes and goes. Like, when we first opened, it was very challenging to get business early on, and what we discovered was we had to have more food. We had to operate more like a restaurant, and that's one thing that restaurants have on bars that we don't think about. Food is a necessity. Now, going out to eat is not a necessity. It's still kind of a luxury thing to do, but eating is a necessity.
Especially if you're drinking strong drinks.
Yeah, and so if you are, a restaurant has the advantage in that there are way more people who are in it to have a dinner than they are to go out and have cocktails, for many reasons. One, just because people don't drink every day all the time, and it's not their.
You need food to survive. You
Exactly.
Don't need drinking. Well, depending on the person, I guess.
So, and restaurant hours generally, when people eat dinner, are usually between 6 and 8 o'clock. So, what is usually your deadest time in a bar is usually 6 to 8 o'clock. You get your crowd maybe beforehand, you get your crowd after, but like, how do you get people in here? So we had to expand our food program, and we had to.
How was that for you? 2 barmen who put the focus on bars. Like, how was that a challenge for you?
I mean, it's the kitchen. Oh my gosh! Like here we are on Restaurant Unstoppable. I'll tell you that, like, you know, our restaurant operations are, you know, I really give the most amazing props to everybody who is restaurant facing. Like, if that's your main concept, like, you know, I do understand the challenges of that, and I've seen it for years. Like, I've worked in restaurants and everything else. But
what were your specific challenges?
We also have some operational ones here because our kitchen is on the second floor.
I was curious about that.
Yeah, so that's a little bit different. So there's definitely some added costs in terms of labor. Your kitchen doesn't have the immediate response of being, not that you usually see people from the kitchen like wandering around the dining room anyway, but like they're not able to just step out of the kitchen and into the dining room and see like what's the night like. Like,
yeah.
what,
are you weeded? Like, what's going on?
And I think, you know, here we get crushed during certain times, and then we're very slow at other times, and that's a hard thing for a kitchen to do. The bam and then dead, and then bam and
Flat
then dead.
sat,
It's the same with
yeah.
the bar. Like it you need a constant flow, and trying to get the business to be in a constant flow is the real difficulty.
So did you have specific challenges? You had a restaurant when you opened, right? But you just didn't have a good program.
We had good food. It was just very limited.
Okay.
We thought like we were opening a bar. We're like, we have to have a cocktail bar. We have to have food because it's something I think
It's a state law, isn't it?
No, it's just one of those things that, and we have. I mean, it is for certain licenses and
I know
things,
in
but
Hampshire
like
you have to do 50% sales of food. Or something
that's
like that.
a, you know, there are licenses here that you can get like a class, what's called a class 12, which is basically you have to sell like 40% food. And you have to have certain operating hours and stuff like that. Like you have to sell food up until a certain time and have your full menu. We have a Series 6 license here, which allows you to be a bar and sell to go alcohol and bottles if we want. And there's no food requirement. So we did that because we wanted to be able to be versatile and not be tied to the food. But now we're trying to get to that 40% number. That's I think is the sweet spot for us. If we can get to 40% food sales, it's going to take our business up to the next level.
So you recognize that in order to bring people in here during more normal, full, say 4 to 5 hours versus 2 hours a night, you needed to offer a great food program. The challenges with that were neither of you had a really food-focused concepts. Although I did eat next door, man, and I don't know, Ross figured out the food thing pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing though, is it's like no matter what you do, somebody's going to come in and look at your menu and say, "Is this it?" Like
yeah.
I think we had at one point we had 25 or 26 options on our food menu, which is like, you know, nowadays the restaurant like wisdom is like shrink your menu down.
Right.
And we had like a tight menu, and people would come in, and we're also in a hotel too, but like people would come in and just look at it. Is this it? You don't have a salad section. You don't have like a burgers section. Burgers? No. One burger is fine for us. We don't need more than one. But people love options, though. I mean, especially like travelers. They like to, people who live in or staying in a hotel, like they want to be able to like pick from comforting things that they know. So we do have like a comfort food element here. It's definitely a new American. There's a lot of like Asian influence, and it's partially because our opening chef, you know, he's does amazing Chinese food and stuff, and
Same chef today? Opening chef? No?
he's not here. He was a consulting chef. It's
Yeah,
actually the guy Bob Tam from Bitter and Twisted. So he came over and made some really fantastic stuff, but he always draws from his experience, you know, different cultures, but like he's got a lot of Thai stuff and Chinese stuff that he does.
I actually love that approach, and I encourage more people. Nothing against chefs, but you can hire a solid chef to help you build a program and build systems around a program and then execute those systems. You know, like I don't know if you need a full-time chef, like an executive chef on staff. Maybe for the creative, maybe for like the costing and the building the systems, and maybe occasional moonlighting to help you change things up, you know, as the world around us changes. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there's a lot of merit to that. I think it's just tough sometimes to find the right person that can do that, because I think there's a lot of chefs that maybe could come in and do something similar to that, and they're either not going to have like a lot of people are good creatively and a lot of people are really good systems wise, and it's very hard to find people
Right.
who do both really well. And then after that you still have to find a team, and you have to have somebody in charge, right? You have to some sort of lead or somebody who can do that stuff, and eventually they're going to want to be a chef or get the title or get more money. And it's like, what do you do then? They either leave or you end up with an executive chef now.
Well, you could have like a kitchen manager that you let have creative outlet and contribute to
Right.
if they
A
can
chef
do
de
it.
cuisine or something.
Right.
You know, you can do.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different options. I do like that approach. Here, because of the fact that it's on the second floor, it's a lot harder for me to constantly be in the kitchen and observing stuff. So, like, it is important for us to have a leader in that kitchen and
How do
really.
you get the food up here?
We have a food runner. We have an elevator.
Is there a
Yeah.
dumbwaiter?
Not a dumbwaiter, an actual
Yeah,
elevator that
cool.
goes between. So that was another consideration too, like from an operational standpoint. Like, how do we get the food up here, and how do we make it hot? How do we make sure that it's
Was
like
there already an elevator that ran through the kitchen?
yeah.
So
There's
is that this elevator that comes?
No,
out
not the
here?
guest elevator. There's one behind the bar. There's a prep room back there.
Is it? Sorry.
No, we're saying.
Is it like a facilities elevator?
Yeah, it's what they would use for other stuff. So at night, there's nothing really going on in there. So it's mostly us, which is another reason why daytime operations would be impossible here. Like, we could never do
competing
lunch.
with all the
Oh yeah,
the
there'd be
linens
people,
going.
yeah. There's
up and
linens
down.
in there and like all the kind of stuff. You don't want that. Like, it's a straight shot for us. We make choices on what we put on the menu based on like, how is this going to last? Like desserts, sometimes we're like, if you have a hot cold dessert where it's like hot brownie, cold ice cream, like how do those two things work together? Getting it from the kitchen up here, because sometimes we're talking about like a 4-minute delay or 3-minute delay to get it upstairs.
Because the elevator is being occupied. Yeah.
How is hot food hot? How's cold food cold? Like, we have to constantly drill into those things, the sense of urgency.
One thing we kind of skipped over, and I want to make sure we come back to it, is actually having a 4th floor restaurant and creating street appeal, street awareness. So what was the evolution of that? First with the sign.
Yeah, the sign is important. We have signage in the hotel had to be an anchor for us. And I think when we first opened,
What do you mean by that?
well, this is a hotel that has 320 rooms. So you have to be able to draw some sort of energy or some sort of business from that hotel. And it was hard. It's hard because another thing, so my partner owns the hotel. It is a franchise Marriott, which means that Marriott still controls how the hotel promotes and does things, and they don't want to promote anything that's not a Marriott brand. So they won't put, like, even to this day, if you go onto the website for this hotel, you're not going to find our website linked on there.
Yeah.
They won't do it. They'll put our phone number, but not our website, not any of our information, not a booking link, nothing. It's just on the 4th floor, Little Rituals, here's the phone number. So, we've been able to do some internal stuff. We do have like elevator signs and things, and we've gotten the front desk to really be more involved in like, telling people about us.
That's what the concierge job is. Like, what local restaurants are
Yeah,
here?
like-
Well, as a matter of fact,
yeah, we
have one in.
Yeah, we have
back
an
of the building.
award-winning bar up on the 4th floor.
Yeah.
So that's definitely helped, and that took a while.
The things I noticed, obviously, this street sign. So, like, you're like, oh, it must be here. Actually, you notice the street sign for Little Rituals before you realize it's a hotel.
Yeah.
You walk in, you're like, is that it? No, that's Starbucks.
Yeah.
And then you keep going, and you're like, oh, there's a projection.
Yeah, we put the projection
wall,
inside of the elevator
which
thing.
brings you towards the elevator.
Right.
Then you get in the elevator, and you're like, well, okay. And then, like, the door's shut. There's branding on the doors on the inside. I don't know if I would have known if Ross wasn't with me the first time that was on the 4th floor, because I didn't really pay attention to detail. But is it right there on the elevator that it says?
Yeah, it says on the 4th floor. Yeah, for sure. We're trying to figure out a solution for the actual key for the 4th floor that says like, maybe it's like a logo that's branded on the actual like button or something. But yeah, one advantage that this actually has is that it does create, like, people have called us a speakeasy before. They're like, oh, this really cool speakeasy or hidden bar in Phoenix. And it's like, we're not hidden. We're actually
We try really hard not to be hidden.
Yeah, I'm like, I actually was going to go out there with a sandwich board tomorrow and start spinning it. But
there's something that is, I think it's kind of like an adventure. Like, it's like knowing, not being so obvious. I think when you think of a restaurant, you think ground level.
Yeah.
Like, you walk in from the street. So having something that's a little bit of you get to ride an elevator, and there's kind of like this transition from hotel to cool vibe with these heavy beads, and like you're like, it is kind of like a secret, which makes it kind of feel a little bit more special.
Yeah, there's a little bit of exclusivity and
Yeah.
things like that, and which does help us. I think the main key for us was switching to reservations. That was the one thing that really, and that happened right out of COVID.
Why?
Because it created a mechanism to, one, draw people in at certain times. So like when we switched away from the first come first serve model, like when we had all of our spots booked up at 9 o'clock or 11 o'clock or 6 o'clock, it forced people into times where we actually needed them to be. And we can control that a little bit more. It helped space things out. It helped pace things. It helped us get more of an idea of when people were going to come in, when our busy times were going to be. It gave us new data. It was a promotional piece. It was something that just didn't exist out there before. So think about it. We use Talk. That's our reservation system.
Why
right now.
Talk? So many different options out there. Why Talk?
Well, a lot of that has to do with pricing models. I'll tell you right off the bat. Like Open Table is a marketing platform. It's less a reservation platform, more of a marketing platform. And the reason I say that is it's geared around people going onto Open Table to find restaurants, and so they charge you also. Appropriately. I don't know appropriately, but they charge you. So you can pick different packages, but imagine one of these middle of the road packages charges you $1 for every person that books through Open Table. Now think about it. If we're a restaurant like we are, or a bar that can have 330 covers on a Friday or Saturday, that's $330 a night that we're paying for that service. Now, were we going to have 330 people through the door already on a Friday or Saturday? Yeah, probably. Maybe not always. There's a percentage of that that's like a marketing expense where you're like, yeah, it probably brought more people in than it would normally, but you start adding that up and you go, wait a minute, we're paying how much for our reservation service per month? Like thousands of dollars, as opposed to one small fee. And we can still do all of these great things and promote, and there's still an existing ecosystem.
So the question is, do you really need to pay for the marketing arm of something, or do you just need the hardware, in this case the software,
right,
to make it happen?
And the thing is, I don't know, because we don't use Open Table. So I don't know what you can't know, right? Like you can't know until you do it. Like I could switch to Open Table tomorrow and maybe all of my Tuesdays and Wednesdays would be like 300 people. I don't know. Like I highly doubt that. I highly doubt that it would have that much of an impact.
I mean, I have this issue with satellite industries that survive off the restaurant industry, like just totally controlling consumer behavior. It's like you wouldn't have a business model if not for restaurant industries, and these adjacent industries that are literally spin out of the restaurant industry by solving restaurant industry problems that can control and prioritize and manipulate exposure based off of your willingness to pay to push your restaurant to the top. And I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of any of it. I mean, I just look back and the old methods of, I don't think anything's ever perfect. I mean, I'm just thinking about how did we market bars and restaurants back in the
You're
the early
fucking
2000s.
Great is how you did it.
Yeah.
People would come back.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you were great. or like you take out ads and stuff in the paper, or you get on the radio or something, but like depending on what kind of place you are, you would never hear certain places advertise.
You
like
had
that.
relationships. You
Yeah.
took care of people. You
Word of
cared.
mouth
You
is still
showed hospitality.
Word of mouth is still king. The only difficulty now is that word of mouth is split between online word of mouth and actual word of mouth. So like, because people are increasingly not interacting with people on a face-to-face basis, you're not just getting the word of mouth from your friend. You're getting your friends posting about going to places, and that's their word of mouth now.
Right.
So there is sort of an element
It's spilled
of that.
over.
Yes.
Yeah. So back to Talk. Any elements of Talk that you think, besides the fact that it's not a lot of the added weight, the fees that you're paying for is the promotional side of things, but it has great software. What was the appeal to Talk?
Well, I mean, I know that it was created by restaurant people. That was kind of a big thing, and it offers the ability to like have different experiences and different booking options. It's very customizable. There's a lot of different options. We were using Yelp's reservation system at the time when we first started, because we originally used something called No Wait, and No Wait was bought by Yelp, and it became Yelp Waitlist. So we were still using when it was Yelp Waitlist, and then so it was an easy transition for us to start adding reservation capability by just switching over to Yelp reservations. But at the time, they didn't really build it out as a fully functioning reservation software. Like, for instance, the reservation software would take reservations all night long, and it knew where those reservations should go in order for the reservation system to work, but it would not relay that information to the host or the restaurant. So like, imagine it would budget out a full slate of reservations for the night, and then you would go onto the app to go into your night, and it wouldn't tell you any of the table assignments. So your host would have to blindly just kind of take things and assign to tables, and you could make a huge mistake if your host wasn't like really good at it. I mean, I would make the mistake too. I'd be like, oh, okay. And then it's almost like putting together a puzzle every day before pre-shift, where you'd be like, I think this is kind of how it's supposed to go. And you might make a mistake. And after laying out the whole evening, you're like, well, how do I have this table that doesn't have a place to go? I mean, Yelp says it should have a spot, but I don't see a spot on here. That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Like, it's absolutely bonkers. Like, the whole purpose of technology is to make things easier. Why do we have something that's like keeping that information from us? And I said to them, hey, is there any plans to like improve this? And they were like, no, not really. And so as soon as they said that, I was like, okay, well,
later.
They might have improved, since, but I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in companies that are wanting to get better. And one of the things that's great about Talk is that they continuously add new features and updates to make their software better.
The thing I really like about Talk, and I don't know if it applies here, is that they have the feature to treat your night like an experience. And we live in the experience economy. Some say that we're transitioning more into the transformation economy. But I think we have traditionally not seen the value in the experience that we provide, and I think that smart operators need to start charging for that experience. And I think what I love about Talk is they give you the option to have that sliding scale. So if you're more of a prefix kind of experiential based restaurant where like you're putting on a show and you're buying a ticket to that experience, then that experience has different value depending on the demand of that experience on a given day. And if there's more value, if you are more likely to sell out on a Friday night, then the value should be more, and you can charge a different price for that. And I don't think that's a slimy thing. I think that is
it's upfront too. I mean,
right.
I used the first time I ever used Talk was to go to the Aviary in Chicago, and that was one of those things where you prepay. And it was like, I don't know how many hundreds of dollars it was for
was it
3 or 4 cocktails.
What day was it?
It was during the week, I think.
Okay.
So it was like,
Never mind.
I mean, it was still, I'm sure it was more expensive during the weekend. Like, the fact that I got a reservation was probably only because
I think it's a good thing because you can get a reservation on a Tuesday during off
Oh,
hours and save money.
And this ties into that whole dynamic pricing thing, which is going to just be a buzzword that gets talked about, buzz phrase for the next few years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's a much better way to do it than say our prices are going to change all the time. It's just like, no, our price. We've done it in the bar industry forever. It's like happy hour. It's days that have specials, days that are.
The drinks are also smaller during happy hour. I think. I picked up on that.
I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, food does that all the time.
Yeah.
That kind of drives me nuts. I understand why, but it's always just like, oh man, like
what a great deal. Wait a second.
Yeah, you can go
There's
get the wings. Yeah, you get the wings during happy hour. They're only $5, and you get like 3 wings on a plate. There was a couple places that were very egregious that I saw, and I was like, oh my god, like this is fucking nuts.
Don't make the deal or the good deal so obviously as to why it's a good deal.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, anything else in terms of tech stack? I mean, this is one thing I really want to start diving more into.
Yeah, absolutely. So we use Talk. We use, we do our own website stuff through Squarespace, which is really important, I feel like, for operators to have control over their website. Whether they have someone else initially build it or not, they need to be able to make updates to it.
Right.
In the minute. We use Upserve, that's our, which is now Lightspeed, as our POS system, which is, undergoing some changes. And I know that, everyone's like, oh, you could use Toast, it's better. But you know what? Like, you can't change POS systems every year.
Yeah.
You have to be able to, like, stick with something for a while.
I think Toast is great. By the way, it's the number one recommended on the show. And this isn't a bash towards Toast. I just think that, generally speaking, owners and operators they think that the best POS, they put way too much energy and thought into POS. I think there are a lot of solid platforms out there, and having a great platform with amazing customer service. I think customer service is where people go, they don't pay attention to that feature.
Oh yeah, no, it's an absolute must. You have to be able to get tech support. Like there's some ones out there, and other platforms we use that like the tech support ends at 5 in the afternoon, and like luckily for like talk, they have tech support. I want to say until it's probably on the Eastern or Central time, but like it's probably till like 11 p.m. Eastern. So like I can still get a hold of them at like 9 o'clock, which there've been many times when like the reservation system has had a glitch or something, and it's like, oh my god, I need to get this fixed right now. It's 8:30, so I've been able to get through to them. Same with Upserve, like we're a bar, we're open till 2. They have somebody available. Like now, Toast. I mean, everything I've seen from Toast is great. Like I think it's also a very viable option. In my mind, those are the only two that I would consider for any of my operations. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the people from Toast originally didn't they work with Breadcrumb back in the day? Wasn't that kind of the evolution of the
maybe
like the name Toast? I think was like there was kind of a little play on like. This is a more fully formed, like
maybe
version of what it was. I don't know. I could be just completely sowing disinformation here, but the systems are very similar. There's a lot of similarities between the two of them. The suite of what they offer, I think the integration of the technology is probably a little better right now with Toast because they're a newer company, and I think they went a certain direction, which was smart. I know Upserve's getting a big tech reinvestment from Lightspeed soon too, but from the hardware perspective, I mean, having good hardware is really important. Having reliable hardware.
So talk, you're using Lightspeed for POS. Yep. What else?
We use 7 Shifts for scheduling.
Okay.
Which we just switched over to this year, and it has been an absolute godsend.
Why? What were you using before?
God, we were using a platform called Paycom. And I think this is one of those things where it's like big companies tend to use these large enterprise systems that are like every conceivable option for everything in the world, except for functionality. And everything was a bolt-on thing that you had to pay more for, and it was just like, if you want your employees to be able to clock in when they show up off their phones, that's something we offer, but it's an additional like $300 a month. And it would just be like, everything was just built on scale for really, really large places, and they didn't have any of the functionality. Like you couldn't see a sales versus labor report like during the night. Like it didn't integrate with the POS system.
Yeah.
It didn't do any of these things. Like 7 Shifts does integrate.
So what was it about 7 Shifts that was a godsend? The integration,
sales
versus labor report.
Yeah, the integration, just the easy scheduling, the way it's just more intuitive. I don't have time. Like running payroll for us with the previous system would sometimes take 3 days. Like no joke. Wow. And I have 16 employees.
How long does it take now?
Maybe 20 minutes.
Wow.
And it only takes me 20 minutes because I am taking tip data from a spreadsheet and entering it into like that. Like there's and even that's going to be obsolete soon because they just upgraded their tip pooling feature, which I'm really excited to do. Nice. They've made enough changes in that in the last 3 months that I can now use it because we have like a very specific way we do tip pooling here. So the flexibility with the tip pooling, they have integrated payroll now, so we're using their payroll. It's just like boom, boom, done. Just really intuitive scheduling stuff, really good data in the scheduling. It's not buggy. It's very stable. I can, the messaging system is great. It's got everything integrated. I mean, there's some other good ones out there too. Homebase was one that was good. They just didn't have everything built out, and I'm sure it's built out now.
Yeah. So during our pre-interview chat, before we hit record, we started talking about one of the challenges with tech. As we go into the future. I mean, I'm a big proponent of to be a competitive operation in the future, you're going to have to start leveraging technology to do more with less. I think you're going to have to lean more on technology and the systems and processes and putting good people into those systems and processes with very little experience and rely on the technology to guide them through the operations of what you have to do. And I think especially younger people will kind of integrate better with technology.
Yeah.
So if you take the thinking out of it and you just say, go through these motions, use this technology to steer you through the motions, and rely more on that than experienced individuals. I mean, you still need experienced individuals, but I think that technology will help us find a middle ground a little bit better because we can lean on the technology. But to your point, what's the downside of all this tech that you made earlier today?
Well, I mean, it kind of ties into like the thing we were talking about with emails earlier, but it's just like at a certain point, when you have enough different tech options in your business, there's a lot of things that people have to learn. And I would say more this kind of goes towards the inventory ordering system tech, but like it can also slip into other things like reservation tech or
What are you using for inventory today?
Craftable.
Okay.
I use Craftable, which has been brilliant, and it's one of those things but it requires a lot of learning, just like any system. But like, in order for it to function correctly the way it's supposed to work, everyone has to be on the same page and using it correctly and entering items correctly and taking accurate inventories and doing all these different things. It's only as good as the people on the ground.
Right. I'm happy you mentioned that, not to get too sidetracked, because there's systems out there I'm very familiar with, becoming more and more familiar with, increasingly more impressed by Restaurant Systems Pro. And I see sometimes reviews come back with these companies that they think that they can purchase the system, pay the monthly fee to have access to the technology, and their problems are solved. But to your point, you still have to use the system.
Yeah.
You still have to put the data in.
It doesn't matter whether it's Restaurant Systems Pro, Margin Edge, Craftable, Upserve Inventory,
Restaurant 365.
Yeah. I mean, whatever Toast has their integrated inventory system.
Chef Tech or Chef Tech, I think.
Yeah, they all operate the same way. They're all just different versions of the same thing, which is
Is it
based.
Extra Table? I can't remember. But
I
Extra Chef?
don't-
Extra Chef, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, keep going.
Yeah, but they all operate the same way. It's all in and out. Like everything has to be done correctly. You have to have the right pack sizes. You have to receive things correctly, the right numbers. You make a mistake on a decimal point or something, or you say that it's a 36 and 36 count, and you take inventory as a 1 count. Whatever you make those mistakes, it's still human error.
Yeah,
like
it's the stuff that. So the way I just describe these tools is, it's a guide wire through the obstacle. You have to fill in the fields, but like by having the fields be there and empty, and if there's like, you still have to go through the motions. It's not going to solve your problems. It just makes you do the things that you're supposed to do. It gives you a path. It gives you a process. You still have to do it. It's not like paying the fee isn't solving the problem. It's not magic.
But that's where I want certain other tech to be able to take care of certain things for me.
You mentioned AI.
Yeah, so like obviously AI is going to play a really huge role in things in the future. And where I would like to see AI actually take over is in things like, here's a good one, is party booking, like event booking. It's one of the most laborious and time-wasting things, because you're going back and forth with a person about something where you can actually have pretty clear-cut guidelines. You can actually, I know there are some systems out there, and that's the thing that I would have liked to have added an additional thing onto my tech stack, and I was looking at some options, and I forget the name of the one that I was looking at. Triple seat.
Well, I was just thinking Triple Seat or Easy Cater or Cater Ease.
So, I looked at Triple Seat, and I was like, this is really cool. And then they told me how much it costs, and I said, oh my god, I don't know that I can justify. Like, it's cool, but I don't know if it's that cool. But like, it would be worth it to me if, when I got that program, 99% of the interactions I could have, because they're all email based. 99% of those could just be conversations between that booking platform and a person, and they can be selecting options, and I can basically see an entire
master document.
Yeah, master document kind of built through these interactions that I could then approve or whatever. And I would love for it to sync with my POS system, and then if all things were good and all conditions were met, it would just book in that party.
Yeah.
And it's just not to that level yet. So I still have to go back and do all that stuff. And then there's still the human element of like, they're eventually going to want to talk to me because they want to bring a karaoke machine in, like, and I have to tell them like, you can't.
But the pain that I heard that you were expressing earlier before we hit record was that it's getting to this point where like just managing the tech alone is becoming a full-time job. On top of everything.
I mean, the amount of time you have to spend on the inventory program, the amount of time you have to, go through all the reservation stuff. I mean, what you used to have to do with pen and paper. So you have savings on one side, and then you have new stuff on the other side. But like, it also creates more opportunities for you to agonize over the data. Like, now that we have data on everybody that comes in the restaurant from one perspective or another, like, we can see their spends, we can see all this different stuff. What do you do with that data? You have to sit there and compile it, right? And in the end, I'm still using Excel spreadsheets to compile this. Like, I'm still, looking at tip percentage trends. I'm still looking at like, what's our cover count? What's our spend? Which of these metrics actually matter, and which ones are just fluff? Am I just, I have all this data now, but like, what does it really mean? Like, And also, sometimes looking at like spend per cover or spend per reservation, it's like it's not actually telling you that much, because you would have to kind of look at like, how long were these people here? Like, what were they actually doing? Like, we have nights where our spend is down per person, but our revenue's up. But it just has to do with one night we have everyone come through and they're not spending 2 hours here like our normal party does. They're coming in pre-concert and they're spending half of what a normal party would, but we're also getting 40% more covers than we would normally.
Right.
That gets lost in the data. Like, you only know that because I'm here on the ground operating.
Right.
And I know that that's what
the
happened.
Community and what's going on.
Yeah. Otherwise, if I was operating this remotely from, a desert island, and I was like, oh, I'll just see how my business is doing, I could look at Saturday and go, oh, spends are down. Must have a meeting with the management about like, how come we didn't have a $14,000 or $15,000 night, and how come it was only a 12? And it's like, yeah, but did you realize there was this concert? Did you realize that the pattern of when people came in? Did you see like, it's like there's not anything that puts all that together yet. I think there's still tech stack that will show you all those individual metrics, but the metrics alone don't actually paint the full picture for the operator.
Do you ever have trouble getting the different platforms you use to play nice together?
Oh yeah, constantly. they all integrate, and which is the only, we wouldn't have them if they didn't, right? But they all have like their strengths and weaknesses on the integration, like, and they always blame the other platform. They're like, well, they don't give us full access, or like, it's like. It's a trade-off. It's like you can pick any POS system you want in the world, and like there's going to be pluses and minuses versus another one, and you're going to always have that like the FOMO of like, I wish I had that. I wish I had 7 rooms, because like look at the cool thing 7 rooms does, but then 7 rooms also doesn't do this other thing you need it to do. So.
Right. I think at the end of the day, I think having a solid tech stack that plays nice with each other, and I think all that, as important as it is, I think really at the end of the day, what's most important is what you do in your 4 walls, and
100%,
like just in terms of like the service and all that, and having something that's solid. I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I don't think the time and energy and worry that goes into having the best, quote unquote, is as important as people think it is. As long as there's a system, as long as it's being done consistently, does it have to be the best in class? Is it that important? I don't think so, personally.
No. It's like inventory systems. They're a perfect example of that, right? Like, what's a really effective inventory system? An Excel spreadsheet.
Right.
Works great.
Right.
I've worked with, I know there's like Beventel and all these other companies, and, that are designed to do things like they weigh every single bottle, and they're like, we'll give you a report and it'll tell you your accurate waste after, And those are still based on human error. Like we had, somebody who used to do the bottle weighing service at Hotel Congress, and he would come back, and when they changed from one person who'd been doing it for a year to the new person was like, you have a really serious problem here. You're losing 30% of your you're wasting 30% a week to overpouring and everything else. I said, that's crazy, because the last 2 years we've been at 95% efficiency. How did we drop so quickly? And he was like, I don't know. And I go back through the report, and he's missing, he just didn't count the entire wine fridge, like, just things like that. But again, that's human error, right? And so, at the end of the day, I used an Excel spreadsheet to cross-verify everything that this bottle weighing company was doing. And that was the only way that I was able to, like, look at the data and prove, like, hey, there might be theft going on, there might be waste, but it's not the percentage you're saying it is.
Right.
So ultimately, if you don't have the money for a fancy inventory program, it's okay. You'll be all right as long as you do the inventory, as long as you do all these things correctly, as long as you have to have cost sheets. It doesn't matter if the cost sheet is typed on a piece of paper, right, or whatever, if you have a cost sheet. Now, these are just tools to make things easier for you. These are things to make things more accurate or easier to use or easier to implement and make you care about it more. Right. That's what it's for. It's not about... it might be elevating, it might be making, like, I'm the only quote unquote salaried front of the house manager here in my own business. It doesn't mean, what these do is it allows me to not have to hire another manager to do some of these other things.
So what's on the future for you? What's the horizon?
Well, we're always looking at new opportunities and projects. I would love to do something different than this. This is a very specialized high-end cocktail bar. I'd love to do something a little bit more relaxed.
Yeah.
I'm a more relaxed person. I'm
Yeah.
not like really.
I don't know. After that tear on technology, it's hard to sell.
I mean, I like, I love all this stuff too. It's like I nerd out. I mean, I spend a lot of time on it. I love it. But, it would be great to just have a bar. I would love to have a bar that I bartended every day. Like, in the future, let's just go 10 years in the future. I'd love to be, in a small town somewhere in Alaska with a heavily wood bar, like just with, my favorite bottles, and I'm making cocktails and I'm entertaining people. And I don't know how valuable of a business strategy that is, but
Yeah.
it's something I'd love to do.
I think, if there's one lesson, I think a lot of people go after the thing they would want to do if they didn't have to do anything else for the rest of like their dream concept, the dream, right? But then how are you going to pay for, I think starting with how do I develop a cash cow? How do I develop something that will make money so I can build systems around that thing and then go do the thing I want to do, or maybe build this up and sell it so I can not have to worry about money so I can go do the thing I want to do. Start with the thing that's going to give you security, right?
Yeah.
So you can go do the things you want to do. Where do you think the industry is going? What are you doing to be a part of that future?
Well, I mean, I hope that we're building more responsible, more thoughtful people, and I hope that we're. I think that the labor force, it's tough because the labor force is doing two things at the same time. It's getting more skilled, and it's there's more people who are getting more skilled and better at their jobs with way more knowledge than we ever had. But at the same time, based on the pace of restaurants opening up, it's unsustainable. I mean, we always talk about how hard it is to find good help in the restaurant industry. And I mean, we have no one to blame but ourselves. I look around, we are building so many new restaurants in Phoenix. Every week there's 5 new restaurants opening up. The end of the year, I mean, just in the downtown area alone, we had a news article last year or the year before. It was 34 new restaurants and bars opened up down here. 34. So you figure an average of 25 people working at each of those places. How many people is that? You're talking about 600 some people working in these restaurants. Where'd they come from? How did you train all 600 of those people to man all of these incredibly ornate, detailed cocktail bar and restaurant concepts that are serving very high concept food? How do you do that?
I mean, I've heard people. I'm listening to Donald Byrne's book right now because I'm actually talking to him on Friday.
That's a great one. Oh man,
his series of books.
Oh yeah, your restaurant still sucks. Yeah, I love it.
Do you know he's based right here in Phoenix, right?
I didn't know that actually.
Yeah, he's based. Right here.
I love his pod. I mean, I got into him through his podcast. I've listened to all of his books. It's fantastic stuff. That's what I was talking about. Some of the podcasts I listen to are smaller chunks. Those are smaller chunk ones. He gives a lot of really detailed, specific information in 30 minutes.
Well, tell him to come by sometime when I see him on Friday.
You got to tell him to come in, man. You tell him to come see me. I have a high level of respect for what he does. There's a few people. You've had a couple of my favorites on your show, but
what were you saying before? Why did I bring Donald Burns up?
Oh, about the team members. Where do you find these people? And
he says there's a storm coming, right? And he was saying that in 2018 when he wrote his first book, Your Restaurant Sucks. I don't know, it's weird that I feel like the storm is kind of here almost.
Oh yeah, it's here.
I don't know, but it's weird because there's still more restaurants being opened. I don't know.
Well, we're also continuing to destroy the world, and there's global warming and all these things, but we continue to, do all the things that we know we shouldn't do, and we're doing them anyway.
So on that vein, on that note, what is it? The mission statement is to change the world through inspiring, empowering, and transforming the industry. How do you think the restaurant industry can influence the correction?
I mean, people just be a little bit more intentional in what they're doing, and I think I've heard people talk about sometimes I don't think it's a terrible thing to reduce a little bit of the labor that's involved in some of these operations. I don't think everyone I wish, not that I don't want people to have jobs, but sometimes it's very hard to find people, but it's do I need, if I could do this over again now, knowing what I know about just this place, there's an extra position that we have every day that we don't need an extra in this current incarnation of this business, we need everybody we have, and we're constantly on the edge of like needing another person, right? But like if we had designed this a little bit more and we'd known all of the challenges that we would have had, we could have probably found a way to take one position out, right? Like I think we just need to be really in more places with intent, like
Go ahead.
Oh no,
I was gonna say I'm thinking right now of Angie's. I don't know if you've heard of Salad and Go, right?
Yep.
But
I have.
So Tony Christophilus sold his rights to Salad and Go to his investors, so he could start over basically. And I think what he's doing to create to remove the chains of the link from where the food, how you source the food to it ending up on the in the guest's hand, from purchasing the pier in Maine, where like so that now they own the pier, they own the processing plant. So like all these different steps in the chain to get the food to you, he's absorbed all those to the point where when you order your food, nobody's taking that order anymore either. It's all automated with like technology to the point where they don't even have somebody handing you the food in the window anymore. Like you just grab it. So it's like, I mean, to your point, like how many people do we really need?
And in an operation like what you're describing for him, that's probably exactly what you do want. Like,
right.
You don't necessarily want to have a bunch of people standing around to hand you a bag. Now, in a place like this, though, where you're paying for that element, like...
So I think what's happening right now is that the industry is just diversifying. It's fragmenting.
Yeah.
It went from full service to full service and quick service, like fast food, to fast casual, to ghost kitchens and pop-ups. And I think that what you're going to see is you're going to see more options for people looking for different things right now. Because no matter what time of day, what time of year, there's different people with different needs, and they're always going to be hungry. So like it's just trying to meet people at different points and different times of their life to give them an option in an increasingly more busy world.
Yeah, and there needs to be, I mean, like, I just wish too that business owners were. It's hard to tell. I'm a business owner. It's like, and I don't want anyone telling me where I should or should not open businesses. But like, where I live in town here, there's virtually no independent restaurants. There's no independent bars. It's just not a thing over there. And I would love to open something over there. That might be something I do. But like, no one's encouraging that. They're encouraging only chain restaurants and chain quick service places to go into that area. And even the people that live there are like, I wish we had this. I wish we had
when
that.
You say they are encouraging, who's they?
Just like developers, real estate people,
Well, I think what it comes down to is the people who are developing these projects. Again, business is all about relationships.
Yeah.
So they tend to, what I think is what leads, why this is a thing, why it's prevalent, is because they have a network of restaurateurs who they can create a path of least resistance. And like, hey, you have a successful concept. I could try to find a tenant that's probably going to last a year, and then find another tenant that's probably going to last a year. Or I can have a tenant that's going to stick around because they have a recognized brand, and I already have a pre-existing relationship with this restaurateur. And like,
no, absolutely. And I think, and I get but even a blend of it, even a blend of those things, like you should have an anchor tenant. Like a lot of these, like some places when you're revitalizing a downtown area, you do need an anchor tenant. You need somebody with name brand recognition, something that's a guaranteed draw. Like if you're going to bring retail into a spot, you need an anchor retail.
Yeah.
You can't just take a chance on a bunch of crystal shops. Like,
yeah. I'll tell you something I want to see a lot less of is nationwide brands. I don't think brands need to be nationwide. I hope with this podcast, what I can do is to inspire more independent operators to think regionally, or help to make it so that there's more competition. So the 2-3 unit operators are thinking like 100 unit operators and competing on a more local level with those national brands. So we have fewer like, Starbucks and Subway and McDonald's of the world, and we have more, think of a brand around here that's hyper local, like Postino, which is now national, but like they started local.
Yeah.
And I'm not like bashing Lauren Bailey for having aspirations to go nationwide, but I want to make it harder for her to do that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, and they've been extremely successful in the stuff that they do locally.
Right.
And that's, And that's, I mean, it's hard to look at it. It's like if somebody turns to you and says, "Hey, could you make $1 million a year, or would you make, 5 to 20 times that?" Like,
right. Well,
is somebody can say no? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
I feel like the argument is if you're not growing, you're eventually dying. People are going to go on and go other places. You need to create the opportunity. But at what point? Like, what's the ceiling? At what point? Like,
that's like the root of all the. We talk a lot in this industry about sustainability, right? Like everyone's always like, how do we increase sustainability? Let's get compostable straws. Let's do this and that. And like, we always do that kind of stuff. But like, unchecked growth is not sustainable. Like, every company will hit its ceiling.
Right.
Every will eventually run out of X,
what does that
Y,
look
Z.
like? I'm really curious about not Moore's law, but what is it? Dunbar's number. Are you familiar with Dunbar's number?
No, I'm not.
It's this number. I don't know how accurate it is, but it's a theory that we humans can only handle about 150 relationships. Beyond that, it becomes too chaotic.
Well, I know about DeFeo's number, and that's probably about 15.
Well,
No,
well what is DeFeo's number?
Oh, I don't know. Just however many people I can remember. Like, sorry, go on.
Well, Dunbar's, it's this idea. I think we're learning more and more about human evolution and how we coexisted, or how we evolved to coexist before the agricultural revolution. And like, how do we create business models that kind of lean into these things, these like hard traits about human nature, to coexist and go with the grain instead of against the grain? And I think getting teams to work in using that number of 150 to kind of be a governor for like you as a restaurant owner can recreate yourself and put layers between you and the work. So you might not know all the dishwashers in your 20 restaurants, but you've recreated yourself and you've created enough layers that the direct report, like the regional manager knows the dishwasher's name. And if you can make it so each one of those layers is not managing more than 150 relationships, I think there's like little clues out there that serve as governors. I want to get the professor who's out in England on the show to talk about Dunbar's number. Like, how do we?
That's a really fascinating thing that I'm
Right?
actually now have to do a little bit more research into that,
So
because
Moore's law is another thing. There's all these like little things, and I think the restaurant industry doesn't look outwards to that kind of stuff. They're so head down in the industry that there's obvious signs. Like, I don't know, but who knows? Somebody might prove that theory wrong.
I don't know. All I know is it's kind of an arms race out there right now in a lot of ways, and it's like, if you look at the way Instagram and the way social media plays into like restaurant marketing and kind of just the way that you see things going. Like, I was talking about the rapid growth here in Phoenix, like how many new restaurants are constantly coming out, and people have gotten into this cycle, I think, where they are only going to new restaurants. And it's like, let's go try this new restaurant. Let's go try this new restaurant. If there's enough new restaurants out there opening constantly, you don't ever have to go to a restaurant you've already been to. Like, right now, I could start out and I could dine out every single day for the next 2 years, and probably not every day, but like, okay, let's just say a few times a week. I could probably never go back to one of my favorite restaurants. What is that?
Are there more than 365 restaurants in Phoenix?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm including. I'm not saying like
your neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, there are more than 365 restaurants in Phoenix for sure. But like, yeah, and I haven't gone to all of them. I'll be really honest. I've lived here for 5 years, and like, I tend to not, or 6 years. I tend to go to the same places multiple times. It's just the kind of person I am. But
I think where we can start, like, where can we start? Let me ask you that question. Where can we start?
Well, the first thing you can do is, find places you like and support them. It's great to go try new things, but we have to elevate and support the people who are doing things right, and really make the conscious decision, I think, to support things we believe in the community, as opposed to just the new shiny thing.
So how do we get that message to the consumer?
That's a really good question, and I wish I knew the answer to that.
Yeah.
But those
are the questions I'm toying with every day, because I've identified that the biggest challenge is the consumer. It's getting a consumer who makes conscious purchasing decisions. I mean, at the end of the day, consumerism, we react to the market, and I think a lot of experts out there will tell you that in order to be successful in the restaurant industry, it all starts with reverse engineering what the consumer wants. But I think that that's a problem, because what the consumer wants is horrible. They want more for less.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of challenges there.
Yeah. So like, at what point do we say, "Hey, consumer, cut the shit, like smack them right off the side of the head, like you're making it worse. It's not good." Ross Simon's in the house. What's up in the background? All right, we gotta actually start wrapping up, man. We're already like 15 minutes over in terms of like my 2-hour goal, and I've been here for almost 40 minutes longer than I said I would. So thank you for letting the conversation go. Any final thoughts? Anything you haven't said?
No, I mean, obviously, I'm really happy to be on a podcast that I really love, and I think has a lot of really good value. I really encourage people who are maybe listening to this for the first time to go back through the wealth of
your episode 1094.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of hours. Hey, but that's great though. I mean, like, just think about and also to go back through some of these episodes and listen to some of the ones that may or may not pertain to you. Like, I mean, I'm talking a lot of bar stuff today, but a lot of the restaurant things that you have on there, like a fast, somebody who's talking about like a fast casual chicken sandwich joint, like. That's not my wheelhouse, but you know what? I can glean a lot of really amazing insights from listening to that too.
And I'm happy you're bringing this up because as I'm trying to evolve my platform, what we're trying to do is archive and make the backlog more searchable. So we're going through it right now, and you can join our first tier of membership for $10 a month. We're going to make it possible for you to search by city, by city and state, by the type of restaurant, i.e. bar, full service, fast casual, quick service, ghost kitchen, pop-up. So you can really go through with a fine comb. What is it, the expression? Fine comb tooth? Wait, why am I struggling with words right now? Fine comb tooth?
Fine tooth comb.
That's what I'm trying to say. Thank you. Fine tooth comb. It's to really go after the content you're looking for specifically. We're going to organize by whether it's like if it's like a workshop or a deep dive like I've done in the past. Is it marketing? Is it systems? Is it culture? Is it we're going to basically put it into is it like human elements, like that kind of stuff that I geek out over. So if you want to support this podcast, go spend that $10 a month. You also get ad-free content. And we're in the process of trying to create a much more shorter, condensed version of highlights, like an hour-long version of the show. So thanks for the plug, man. I kind of piggybacked on your plug.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. No, it's awesome. I mean, we're always working on new stuff ourselves, and you asked me what was next earlier, and I kind of was talking about opening bars, but one of the things that we're working on right now and that we're currently doing is stable beverage, which is that's right. Citrus replacement, and I think that's something that could be really huge soon.
I think it's cool when people who are in the industry, who spend their life in the industry, are able to identify issues in the industry, and then they can be a part of solving their problem and solving other people's problems and having satellite spin-off businesses from this. So let me ask you a couple more questions before we say goodbye.
Yeah, sure.
What's one thing about your business, a value, a process, a system that's uncommon and makes you truly unstoppable?
I mean, I think one of the things that is probably more uncommon these days is for ownership to be as hands-on as I think our ownership is.
Yeah.
And that's something I truly value. And I think as we go through everything that we do in the future, whether it's in partnership with Ross or myself just alone, having that hands-on touch is so important. I think, because you want to be able to inspire your coworkers and your teammates to sort of, push themselves too, and also just respect the ownership for being involved. I mean, it's a layer that I think is just sometimes it's way too insulated. And I'm not saying that the owner needs to necessarily wash dishes every day for full shifts, but being there and being present and being there to listen to them and have that open dialogue with your team. That's something that I think is really important.
Yeah, it's huge, man. The mission statement is to change the world by inspiring, empowering, and transforming the industry. I think we're going to accomplish that by transforming one owner at a time. So how have you personally transformed? Give me an example of how you evolved over time.
Oh my gosh, so many different ways, because I think I never fully understood what it took. I think patience is one of those things. I used to be a lot more yelly. I think I stopped doing that. I don't yell anymore. I was a little bit more, a little more on the John Taffer side of the yelling. to do a call out there, but I think like my temper and I'm actually much more reserved and in business life than I am in personal life. So I don't get angry at things. I don't get as frustrated with things as I used to. I think just keeping that level head has helped me weather a lot of different storms.
Awesome. This is the last question. If you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of you, your work, and your restaurants will be lost with your departure, with the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom that you could leave behind for the good of humanity and your legacy. What would those 3 pieces of wisdom be?
I think one would definitely be, the value in this industry for industry people is, above all, try to be the best person you possibly can. One. 2, have recipe costing cards for all recipes.
It's important. You got to know what your costs
are. Yeah. And 3, have true humility and just realize that no matter what you're doing or what you're about to do, somebody else has probably already done it, and that all you can do is be the best version and do the best version of the thing you're trying to do.
I've loved this conversation today, Aaron. Thank you so much. So the majority of my guests are found through word of mouth. That's actually how I found you. Ross called you out, your business partner. I had him on the show a couple episodes ago. Who do you respect and admire?
I respect a lot of people. What version or what area of the country are you thinking?
I'm headed to Southern California next. But I mean, I keep a backlog. I mean, I file all these names away. So I really want who's coming into your heart, who's coming into your mind in terms of they run a great restaurant, they take care of their people, they're fiscally responsible, they're making a difference. Who comes to mind?
There's some people in Utah. I know it's a little bit.
I'm actually going through Utah on my way back east.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, if you get a chance to talk to the fine folks behind, I believe it's called Church and State Hospitality, but it's the people who own Water Witch and Bar Gnome in Salt Lake. They've kind of been on the forefront of the hospitality scene there, and it's not necessarily the city you would think of first when you think of restaurants and bars,
right? But
they have an outstanding community and really just some of the best people, and I tend to find myself gravitating towards the best people, like people, less about necessarily people. I mean, they're very talented too, but just like I don't necessarily like go hang out with people who are extremely talented. I'd rather hang out with people who are just really incredible individuals.
Yeah.
So it's Sean Nevis and Scott Gardner from Water Witch. Really fantastic. In fact, Scott surprised me last night just flying in for the night to come be part of our 5th anniversary celebration. He didn't have to do that, and there was no reason for him to do it other than he just wanted. He was only here for an hour. And just said hello.
Well, I'll be like I said, I'll be rolling through Utah to connect with Ovation, a company that I'm really excited about and like to support. So I'll definitely reach out to Sean and Scott over at Church and State Hospitality. And how can we connect with you? Who do you wait? I just asked. You can tell that this has been a long week for me. How can we connect? I.e., if you're looking to grow your team, if they just want to follow you on social, what's the best way to connect?
I mean, Doc DeFeo is like my handle on Instagram and Facebook and everything. So people can always reach out to me there. SolidSipping.com is my consulting umbrella company. Yeah. Everyone can get a hold of me there. They can book appointments with me. They can get on a call with me. I love talking to people. I'm always there to help out. I mean, I don't know how much help I can be. Like, I'm sure there's other people that, but I have a lot of perspective. So
Aaron DeFeo, my man, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story, your knowledge, your experiences, your perspective. There is no questioning. You are unstoppable.